Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. They say some houses aren't haunted by ghosts, but by memories that refuse to die, and I wish someone had warned me before I stepped foot into the Holloway estate. The headlines from decades ago screamed of vanished families, voices in the walls, and a boy who was never found. That house, standing in the middle of the forgotten pine woods of Barrow Creek, didn't just sit empty. It waited. It watched. And the moment I crossed the iron gate, rusted and bent like broken ribs, I swear the wind whispered my name, not in greeting, but in warning. I arrived in Barrow Creek in the dead heat of late July. The sky was a sunburned smear of orange and gray, heavy with something unspoken. I wasn't here for thrills or ghost stories. I'd inherited the Holloway property through a relative I never met, an uncle who'd apparently died decades before I was even born. The will was discovered during a bank audit. My name was on the deed. And curiosity, the kind that nibbles at you in quiet hours, did the rest. I was alone in life, no siblings, estranged parents, a life stripped of attachments. It felt almost poetic to claim a home no one else wanted. But the Holloway house didn't want to be claimed. From the first glance, it struck me that this wasn't just a building. It was a presence. 3 stories tall, with shuttered windows like tired eyes, its once white walls were now crusted in moss and black mildew. Ivy strangled the porch columns. A faded swing creaked slowly, though the air was still. I stood at the gate, my duffel slung over my shoulder, phone in hand, ready to snap a picture, only to find the screen frozen and black. Not dead, just off. I hit the power button. Nothing. I chalked it up to poor reception. But even then, my gut clenched. Still, I walked in. The gate screamed on its hinges as I pushed it open, and the moment my shoe hit the gravel path, a chill ran through me. Not a breeze. Not a drop in temperature. It was a sense, primal and wrong, like I'd stepped into the skin of something long dead. The front door opened on its own. I didn't even realize it at first. One moment it was closed. The next, it yawned open like a mouth ready to speak secrets. I hesitated. Of course I did. Anyone would. But some foolish pride inside me kept me walking. My boots hit the dusty floorboards of the foyer with a hollow sound, like knocking on a coffin. Inside, the house was absurdly quiet, not peaceful. Stifled. Air thick with the scent of rotted wood, old paper, and something metallic, like rusted pennies soaked in stagnant water. The floor creaked under every step. Wallpaper peeled in curling sheets. A massive chandelier hung above, crusted with cobwebs. And yet, everything felt cleaner than it should, like someone had tried to keep it presentable, recently. I left my bag near the stairs and did a slow lap of the ground floor. Dining room with chairs neatly tucked. Living room with a grand piano, every key exposed like teeth. A study full of books untouched by mold, their spines crisp and ink too fresh for their apparent age. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms. One had a child's bed. Another, 2 twin beds, both neatly made. The master bedroom held a wardrobe that reeked of lavender, its mirror covered by a dark shroud. I told myself ghosts weren't real. That fear was inherited, just the way a child mimics a parent's fright. But as I wandered those halls, it wasn't fear I felt. It was pressure. The house watched me. Not metaphorically. Watched. The feeling was strongest in the narrow hallway on the 2nd floor, where the wallpaper was warped in strange bulges, as if something underneath pressed forward. And then, the first noise, a creak. Not beneath me, but above me. The attic. It was almost funny. Every haunted house had an attic scene, right? But this wasn't funny. The sound wasn't just wood shifting. It was measured, paced. Someone, or something, was walking just above my head. I should have left. I should have. But I didn't. I called out, "Hello," silence. No wind, no movement. Then, as if in answer, something knocked. 3 short, sharp knocks, right above me, like a hand on wood. I took a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My skin felt too tight for my body. I found the attic ladder in a hallway closet, folded up into the ceiling like a secret. I pulled the cord. The ladder creaked as it unfolded. I peered up into the black mouth above. A long inhale of rot and dust greeted me. I clicked my flashlight. The beam hit wood, broken furniture, and scratches on the attic floor. Dozens of them, some shallow, some deep, like they were made with frantic fingers. And at the far end of the attic, just before the light gave out, I saw a child's shoe. A single, dirt-caked shoe facing the wall. I climbed slowly, step by creaking step. The attic air was thick, almost wet. My flashlight flickered, once, twice, and then went out. Total black. I stood frozen. I didn't breathe. Then, laughter. A child's laugh, dry, hollow. Right behind me. My legs forgot how to move. But I turned, slowly, and there was nothing. Then came the whisper, not from one direction, from all sides. Like a chorus of breaths brushing past my ears. One word, stay. I bolted. I don't remember hitting the steps, only that I didn't fall. I ran, down the hallway, past the warped wallpaper that now bled a dark ooze I hadn't seen before. I reached the front door, grabbed the knob. It wouldn't turn. I pulled, slammed, kicked, locked. From the outside I ran to a window, same, stuck, glued shut like they'd never been meant to open. I tried to call for help. Phone still dead. Every outlet in the house was just an empty hole in the wall, no wires, just darkness. I wasn't alone. That much was clear. But the worst moment came when I looked back at the staircase. My duffel was gone. Someone had moved it, placed right beneath the attic stairs. And on top of it, something small and brown. The child's shoe. I slept in the hallway that night, back to the wall, flashlight clutched in one hand and a fireplace poker in the other. I didn't sleep much. Because every hour, like clockwork, I heard it again. 3 knocks from the attic. At 1:00 a.m. I heard pacing. At 2:13 the whisper, stay. At 3:37 something pressed its face against the hallway mirror from the inside. By dawn, my body ached with exhaustion and terror, but I made myself move. I searched the house again, this time with intention, looking for wires, escape routes, answers. The back door was bolted with a lock I couldn't find a key for. Windows painted shut. Even the basement, which I finally found behind a hidden panel near the pantry, had a gate of thick iron bars. Who puts bars on the inside of a basement door? But that wasn't the worst part. No, that came when I pried up a loose board in the study, hoping to find some sort of crawl space. Instead, I found paper, a yellowed journal, and written inside, in rushed, cramped handwriting was this: if you're reading this, you're already inside. And once you're inside, the house knows you. It marks you. You'll see it watching. You'll feel it breathing. It's not haunted. It's hungry. Feed it, or it feeds itself. The last page was torn, smeared in something dark. Not ink. The next few hours passed in a blur of adrenaline. I tried to break glass, bash doors, shout loud enough for someone, anyone, to hear. But the house absorbed every sound, swallowed it. And then, night fell again. The chandelier lit itself. Room by room, candles flickered on in their holders. The piano played a single note again and again. E, like a call, like a pulse. And in the master bedroom, the black sheet had fallen from the mirror. Not dropped, placed, folded neatly on the dresser. I saw my reflection, and behind me, smiling, the boy with the missing shoe. Eyes like pits, grin too wide, head cocked. He lifted a hand and pointed, not at me, at my back. I turned. Nothing. But in the mirror, he still pointed, still smiled. And then the whispers began again. Only now they had names. Mine was one of them. By morning, I wasn't sure if I'd actually slept or just blacked out. The Holloway house had a way of bending time. Minutes felt like hours, and hours like nothing at all. I was still in the same hallway where I'd spent the night, back pressed to the faded floral wallpaper. Every nerve in my body coiled like wire. The whispering had stopped sometime around dawn. just as the first light broke through the gaps in the boarded up windows. But what I couldn't shake, what hadn't left me even as the house seemed momentarily calm, was the image of the boy in the mirror, his finger raised. That grin stretched too far, pointing at my back, and yet when I turned, there was nothing. No cold breath, no sudden chill. Just the ache of paranoia burrowing under my skin. I gathered what little courage I had left and returned to the master bedroom. The mirror, that large oval one carved into the wardrobe door, now reflected only me. Just a gaunt, tired man trying to make sense of a nightmare that had somehow become real. The folded sheet still sat on the dresser, perfectly creased, as if someone had pressed it. A gesture far too careful for any drifting spirit. I didn't touch it. Couldn't. It felt like a trap, a thread that, once pulled, would unravel whatever fragile sanity I still had. My stomach growled, loud and painful. It hit me then that I hadn't eaten in nearly 24 hours. I made my way downstairs toward the kitchen, hoping to find something edible. The pantry door was slightly ajar, swinging gently as if recently moved. Inside, the shelves were mostly empty, dust thick on every surface. But one item sat centered on the middle shelf, a glass jar of preserved peaches, the label faded and curled. Beside it, a spoon rested on a folded napkin. It was as if the house had set the table for me. I stared at it for a long while, torn between hunger and instinct. Eventually, I picked it up, turned it over. The lid creaked as I opened it, and the smell hit me. Not peaches, not syrup, but something sharp and coppery. I dropped it immediately. The jar shattered on the floor. Inside, floating in thick fluid, wasn't fruit. It was a tongue. I stumbled back and fell hard against the counter, bile rising in my throat. That wasn't a trick of the light. It was real. A human tongue, bloated and pale, bobbing in syrup like a grotesque garnish. And that spoon. It hadn't been placed there for me to eat. It was part of the offering. I ran from the kitchen, stumbling into the hallway, clutching at the walls. Every room now felt different. The air had shifted. It was warmer, thicker, like the house had exhaled after watching me react, and it was satisfied. Back in the study, the journal I'd found the night before lay open, though I was sure I'd closed it. A new page had been turned, and across the top in smeared, dark writing was a single phrase: feed or be fed. Below it, scrawled in the margins, someone had drawn a crude map of the house. Except this map included something that hadn't been on any blueprint I'd seen when I inherited the property. A second basement, beneath the one I'd already found. I had to check. I couldn't explain it. But something inside me, some mixture of dread and fascination, pushed me toward that hidden space. I returned to the pantry and opened the door to the known basement. The iron gate still stood there, unmoving. But now, something else caught my eye. A small hinge on the side wall, half covered in dust. A false panel. With shaking fingers, I pried it open. Behind it, a narrow tunnel sloped down into darkness. Rough-hewn steps, clearly carved by hand, led deeper underground. The smell was unbearable, rot, damp earth. And something else I couldn't place. I turned on my flashlight, half expecting it to fail again, but this time it held. The steps seemed to go on forever. 10, 20, 40, until the light above was a pinhole. The tunnel opened into a low, wide chamber carved straight into the stone. And lining the walls were shelves, hundreds of them. On each shelf, a jar, just like the one in the pantry. Each holding something. A nose, a hand, an eye, even a scalp. I staggered back, heart slamming in my chest. This was a collection. A museum of human parts preserved in liquid. Each jar had a label, though the writing was mostly illegible. Faded names, dates. Some scratched out entirely. Then I heard it again. The whispering. Only now it was coming from beneath me. I crouched and placed my hand on the floor. It was warm, vibrating. A low hum, like something alive, moved just under the surface. Then came a thud, faint but steady, like a heartbeat. And then, scratching. Something was clawing at the stone from below. I turned to leave, but the tunnel behind me was no longer empty. The boy was there, same as before, dirt, smudged face, sunken eyes, crooked smile. But now he was real, tangible. Standing there, barefoot, arms at his sides. His mouth moved, but no sound came out, just silence. Until, finally, he opened it. Not wide, not unnatural, just enough to show me there was no tongue. It had been his in the jar upstairs. He raised his hand and pointed again, not behind me this time, but down. Then he stepped backward into the darkness, his form folding into shadow as if he'd never been there. I ran. Up the tunnel, up the stairs, through the pantry and into the hallway. But the house had changed again. The furniture wasn't where I'd left it. The chandelier swung gently, though there was no wind. And the mirrors, every mirror in the house now reflected someone else. Faces I didn't recognize, all staring, all smiling. I wanted to scream, to rip them down, but I was too tired, too lost. I retreated to the study, slamming the door shut. The journal was gone. In its place, a new object sat on the desk. A photograph, black and white, curled at the edges. It showed a family, mother, father, 2 kids, standing in front of the house, all wearing stiff smiles. And in the window behind them, on the 2nd floor, stood the boy. Not as a child, not ghostly, just older, watching. The back of the photo had a note: "They fed us. Now they stay. You won't be lonely much longer." I dropped the photo, heart pounding. The door creaked behind me. Someone, or something, was turning the knob. I didn't wait to see what. I dove through the other side, sprinting down the hall toward the front door. Again, it wouldn't open. But this time, I didn't stop. I grabbed the heavy end of the hallway table and swung it into the glass with every ounce of strength I had. Crack. Again. Crack. The glass didn't break, it warped. Ripples moved through it like water, and then a hand reached through from the other side. Pale, long fingers, nails yellow and cracked. It grabbed my arm and pulled. I fought, kicked, bit, screamed, and as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. I fell backward, breath heaving, and the front door stood whole again, untouched. That night, the house didn't whisper. It sang, a low, humming lullaby, muffled and wet, like it came from something singing through a mouth full of fluid. I hid in the coat closet, wrapped in an old, moth-eaten trench coat, the fireplace poker still in hand. But even that offered no comfort, because I knew, without a doubt, that the house was learning me, watching how I reacted, studying how I moved, and the next time it wouldn't just scare me, it would take something. And if I didn't give it what it wanted, it would choose for me. The house was quiet when I woke, but it wasn't the kind of silence that brings peace. It was the thick, pressing kind that feels like it's hiding something just beneath the surface. I hadn't meant to fall asleep. I had tucked myself into the coat closet again, knees to chest, poker in hand, and told myself I'd just rest my eyes for a minute. But when I blinked awake, the world outside the slats of the closet door had changed. The hallway light, which hadn't worked before, now glowed a pale yellow. The pictures on the walls were different. What had once been old, water-stained prints were now family portraits, but not my family, not any family I recognized. They stared out from frames lined neatly across the hallway, glass gleaming, eyes too focused. And in the middle of each photograph, no matter the year, no matter the setting, there he was again. The boy, sometimes younger, sometimes older. In one picture, he looked no more than 6, holding a toy horse with a chipped head. In another, he stood stiff and tall in a military uniform, though the face was unmistakable. That dead stare, that sliver of a grin. Always looking, always facing the camera, no matter where the others were turned. Like he knew. Like he saw me through the film. I pushed the closet door open and stepped into the hallway, every nerve wound tight. I half expected the floor to shift under me, or the walls to groan. But there was only the tick of an old grandfather clock echoing from the sitting room. It hadn't worked before. Now, Its pendulum swung with lazy determination, counting down something I didn't want to understand. As I made my way back toward the study, I noticed something new, a fresh set of scratches on the hallway wall, thin, ragged lines. Like someone had taken a nail to the paint and dragged it slowly. They weren't there the day before. There were 5 lines, each about 6 feet long, starting near the ceiling and stopping just at shoulder height, and at the end of each line was a small dot of something dark and dried. Not paint. It looked like blood. I reached out without thinking, my fingertips brushing the groove of one scratch. The moment I touched it, a sound burst into my ears. Loud, sudden, a child's scream, sharp and full of panic, not just echoing in the hall but in my skull. I fell back, hitting the opposite wall hard, gasping as the sound faded as quickly as it came. The mark on the wall now pulsed, like something beneath the plaster breathed. That's when the whispering started again. This time, it wasn't just in the attic. It was everywhere. A low murmur rising from the floorboards, seeping through the walls, curling down the stairwell like fog. Dozens of voices. Some calling names, others sobbing. Just one, laughing softly, almost rhythmically. And underneath it all, barely noticeable unless you truly listened, was the sound of something scraping. I followed the whispers down the hall to the second bedroom on the left, the one with the twin beds. The door was half open now, though I had left it shut. Inside, the beds were freshly made, white linens, perfect hospital corners. Between them stood a small table I hadn't seen before, and on it sat a porcelain doll, its face cracked straight down the middle. One eye blinked slowly as I entered, and the other stared, glassy and unmoving. The scrape grew louder. I inched toward the window and pulled back the curtains. Outside was nothing but forest, same as before. But now the trees were closer, much closer. They'd crept up to the very edge of the house, branches pressed to the glass like skeletal fingers. The forest was alive in a new way. Every leaf shimmered, not with light, but with movement. Things shifting, watching, waiting. I turned back to the beds, but now only one was made. The other was ruffled, the sheet pulled half off, and the doll was gone. I didn't hear her move. I didn't hear anything. But as I backed away, I noticed something crawling, no, sliding. Out from under the bed. It was slow, deliberate. I froze, breath caught in my throat. A hand, pale and thin, emerged first. Then a face. Not the boy. A girl. Her eyes were sewn shut with coarse thread, lips stitched the same. She was mouthing something I couldn't hear, couldn't understand, as she dragged herself silently onto the floor. Her fingers scraped along the wood, and that was the sound I'd heard, her nails dragging across the floorboards. I ran. I didn't think. I slammed the door behind me and sprinted down the hallway, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. I didn't stop until I reached the stairs. But just as I grabbed the banister to descend, I felt it. The house shifted. Not metaphorically. The entire structure tilted, like it had been resting at a slant all along and only now chose to reveal it. I stumbled, rolled down the stairs, landing hard at the bottom. Pain shot up my shoulder, and something in my back twinged, but I didn't dare rest, because the doll was sitting on the bottom step, head tilted, waiting. I dragged myself to the front door again. Pulled, pushed, no movement. I beat on the glass, screamed for help, but there was nothing beyond the trees. Nothing but shadows, and then I saw them. Faces in the forest. Dozens. Some human, some not. Watching from between the trunks, eyes glowing faintly, like coals left in a dying fire. One raised a hand and touched the bark of the nearest tree. The entire tree shivered, and so did I. Back inside, the whispering stopped, replaced by breathing. Deep, slow, rhythmic. It wasn't mine. It was above me, in the ceiling. I glanced up just as a bulge formed in the plaster. Something moved beneath the surface, shifting, crawling. Then a crack. A long, jagged fracture ripped across the ceiling and dust rained down. I didn't wait to see what would follow. I ran toward the back of the house, toward the only room I hadn't truly examined. The dining room. It was exactly as I left it, chairs tucked, table bare, but something new lay at the head of the table. A place setting. Fork, knife, spoon. A covered silver dish, gleaming like it had just been polished. And beside it, a note. "Dinner is served. Please enjoy." I lifted the lid. Inside was my photograph. Not the one from before, a new one. Taken while I slept in the closet. Me, knees to chest, poker clutched in hand. And something else in the frame. A figure. Looming, tall and thin, faceless, standing just inches from the closet door. I stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. The silver lid rolled across the table and fell to the floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the entire house. And then I heard a door open upstairs. Not slam, not creak, just open. Smoothly, deliberately. Footsteps followed. Heavy ones. Slow. And not from a child. No, this was something older. Something bigger. It was coming down the hallway. I grabbed the poker again and backed into the kitchen, searching for something, anything to defend myself. But all the drawers were empty now. Even the cabinets, bare, like the house had decided I didn't need tools anymore. I would only need fear. The footsteps reached the stairs. I pressed myself into the pantry, breathing as shallow as I could. My body screamed from the fall, my shoulder throbbed, but I didn't dare make a sound. Through the crack in the door, I saw it. A shape. Not clearly, but enough. It moved like it had too many joints. Arms swinging just a bit too wide, head tilted far too low. It sniffed the air, then paused, and began to hum. That lullaby again. The one from the night before. But this time, I knew the words. I couldn't explain how, but I knew them. And they terrified me more than anything else so far. Because they spoke of welcoming, of consuming, of becoming part of the house. I held my breath. The thing paused near the pantry door. Its humming stopped. It reached out, touched the handle, and then a loud bang from upstairs. A scream. The boys. The creature turned and ran, its limbs flailing like broken branches, crashing back up the stairs in seconds. I didn't question it. I bolted from the pantry and ran for the basement, down the first set of stairs, past the iron gate, into the hidden tunnel, back to the room with the jars. But now, the jars were empty. Every one of them. And the walls blood. Not metaphorically, they blood. Thick rivulets of dark fluid seeped from every crack, every corner, and the heartbeat returned. Louder now. Stronger, like the house had found me. Like it had claimed me. And I realized then, I hadn't just been lured here. I had been chosen. I don't remember climbing back out of the basement. My hands were slick with whatever oozed from the walls. Blood, tar, sap from some ancient, rotting thing, I couldn't tell. My legs shook beneath me, barely managing to drag my weight up the steep, narrow stairs. The walls felt like they were pulsing now, alive with heat and breath. Every board in the floor creaked as if groaning under pressure. The house wasn't just shifting anymore. It was changing. It was closing in. When I emerged into the hallway, the world above had warped again. The layout was wrong. The staircase wasn't where it had been. The chandelier hung lower, almost brushing the floor, its crystals rattling though there was no wind. Doors appeared where none had been. Some that I knew led to certain rooms, now opened into walls, closets, or long black corridors that stretched far beyond the dimensions of the house. It was as if the Holloway estate was unraveling its true form. Not the neat colonial facade that sat beneath the pine trees for 100 years. No, this was the version beneath the skin, the inside-out anatomy of something ancient, clever and cruel. I turned to retreat toward the study, to orient myself, to try and reclaim even a scrap of familiarity, but the study door was gone. Just gone. In its place was a new hallway. Long. Thin. No windows. Every few feet another door on either side. All closed. None labeled. I hesitated, knowing whatever lay at the end wasn't meant to be found. But my feet moved anyway. The floor beneath me felt slightly spongy, like old carpet soaked in moisture, and each step made a soft squelch. I didn't open the doors as I passed them. Not at first. But on the sixth one, something scratched on the other side. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't angry. It was polite, steady, rhythmic, as if someone behind the wood tapped once every 5 seconds, waiting for acknowledgement. It followed me. Door after door. That same knock. Always in the door just beside me. Never ahead, never behind. And then it spoke. A whisper, like breath against my ear, "Don't pick the wrong one." My heart dropped into my stomach. I turned slowly, certain I'd find someone standing behind me, someone inches from my back. But I was alone in the hallway, the walls still close, the lights dim and flickering overhead. Then I noticed something else. The air smelled sweet, sickly sweet, like rot masked with perfume. It made my nose twitch and bile rise in my throat. Something was leaking from beneath one of the doors, a golden, syrup-like fluid, thick and slow. I knelt, touched it. It burned, not hot, not acidic. It burned emotionally, if such a thing could be said. As if every memory of regret in my mind surged to the front the moment I touched that syrup. Images of things I'd forgotten, or tried to. My mother crying in the kitchen. My dog Loki dying in my arms. Things that had stayed buried, forced to the surface with just that single drop. I stood, heart racing, and chose the door without the syrup. Inside, the room was dark, completely dark. No light from behind me, no ceiling bulb, no glow from windows. But I stepped in anyway, poker raised like it could still protect me. The moment I passed the threshold, the door slammed behind me with the weight of a closing tomb. Silence. Total, oppressive silence. I reached out, trying to find a wall or switch, anything. But instead my hand brushed something soft. Fabric, cold, and then breathing, right in front of me. I froze. Something stood there. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. Heat radiated off it in small bursts, like it had been breathing hard or running. It didn't move. Neither did I. My hand trembled, still clutching the poker, but even raising it felt like an offense in this thick silence. Then it spoke. Not loudly. Not menacingly. Just one word alone. The lights exploded to life. Not switched on, exploded. A bright white flash filled the room. And in that moment of burning clarity, I saw everything. The room was empty, except for a mirror on each wall. And in each mirror was me. But not just me. One was me screaming, face twisted in terror, blood pouring from my mouth. One was me laughing madly, eyes gouged out, hands twitching. One was me, dead, hanging from a noose, swinging gently. All these versions stared back. And then, in the center of the room, the real mirror, the one not on a wall, but standing on a thin pedestal, shimmered. My reflection rippled like a disturbed pond. And he stepped out, the boy, again, but older now, gaunt, his skin pale, stretched thin over sharp cheekbones. His eyes were bottomless, and his smile, that cursed, curved smile, remained. He didn't speak. Instead, he raised a hand and gestured downward. At my feet, I looked down. A new trapdoor had appeared beneath me, its outline glowing faintly. I knelt, compelled, and opened it. A ladder led into blackness. And carved into the wood above the trapdoor, written in the same handwriting from the journal, was a warning: the house is not haunted. The house is host. I didn't want to go down there, but something in me already had. My foot hit the first rung, then the second. Then the darkness swallowed me, and as I descended, the trapdoor closed gently above, locking me into the house's veins. Down there, I found the room without a door. No way in, no way out. Just a space the house made to hold things. And I wasn't alone. Not anymore. Something moved in the far corner. A shuffle. A whimper. And then, a voice I hadn't heard in years. Help me. It was my sister. But I never had a sister. I never did. So why did I remember her now? I didn't move at first. Couldn't. The air in the room was wrong. It wasn't just thick. It was full. Every inch of it carried a weight, like the breath of 1,000 mouths had been exhaled and trapped here forever. The ladder behind me had vanished, absorbed into the ceiling like It had never existed. I stood in the center of a room that didn't feel like a room at all, more like the hollowed out chest of something ancient, alive and watching. And then came the voice again. Help me. It echoed from the far corner, quiet, trembling, impossibly familiar. It wasn't just that I recognized it. It struck something deeper. A memory not recalled, but injected. I saw flashes. A girl on a swing, braided hair, a broken toy, a sharp scream, then silence. My mind rejected it, screamed that it was false. But my heart didn't. My heart clenched like it had known her all along. I took a step forward, the floor beneath me groaning like bones grinding together. The darkness receded with each step, slowly revealing what lay ahead. There she was, kneeling in the corner, back to me, hair matted with something dark and wet. She wore a dress too thin for the cold. Her shoulders trembled with each breath. She was muttering something under her breath. Over and over, I crept closer. The words became clearer. Don't let it in. Don't let it in. Don't let it in. She turned, and I swear for a moment, I saw my own eyes looking back at me. That's when I realized this wasn't a ghost. This wasn't a memory. This was something the house had made, and it had made her for me. Her face was pale, not in the way of spirits or corpses, but like paper soaked in water and left to dry, fragile and almost translucent. Her mouth was sewn shut with the same thick black thread I'd seen on the girl crawling from beneath the bed. But she was trying to speak, her eyes wide, pleading. And then I noticed what she was pointing at, the wall behind me. It was changing, slowly, peeling open like skin pulled back from a wound. A wide, vertical slit formed, revealing something pulsing and raw beneath it. Flesh, muscle. And then, slowly, a hand reached through. But it wasn't a human hand. It was long, covered in that same glistening syrup I'd touched upstairs. Fingers tipped in bone, nails like thorns. It groped at the air, grasping for something, grasping for me. I turned back to the girl, heart hammering. Her head shook violently. She reached out, fingers brushing mine, and for the briefest second I felt warmth, human warmth. But when I tried to pull her up, she screamed. Not with sound, but with her eyes. A deep, violent scream that spoke only one thing, R-U-N. I didn't need to be told twice. I ran. The room shifted as I did. The walls bulged, the ceiling narrowed. The slit behind me widened into a gaping maw, and from it came not just one hand, but dozens. Reaching. Breathing. As if the house was birthing something it hadn't formed completely yet. Ahead, a doorway emerged, no frame, no handle. Just an opening, tall and black. I dove through it, and fell. Not like tripping down stairs or dropping off a ledge. I fell. Like gravity forgot what direction meant. Time unraveled. Sounds distorted. My own scream came out backwards, sucked into my lungs instead of expelled. I tumbled through darkness that pulsed and stretched, my body weightless and burning. And then I landed. Hard, on my back. The wind knocked from my lungs. I gasped and opened my eyes. I was back in the living room, or a version of it. Everything was cleaner, neater, no dust. The chandelier above gleamed, each crystal perfect. The couches were new, the wallpaper fresh. A fire crackled in the hearth. It looked untouched. But I knew better, because sitting in the armchair, legs crossed, was the boy, older again, maybe mid-20s now, dressed in old-fashioned clothes like a photograph from the 1930s. He sipped from a teacup and smiled at me. Finally, he said, in a voice smooth as honey and twice as false, "We can speak properly." I said nothing. I couldn't. My throat burned. My limbs ached. He didn't seem to mind the silence. "You've seen the house," he said, "but not the heart of it. You've met its children, its leftovers, its trials. But the house is still choosing." He set the cup down gently on a saucer and stood, towering over me. "It needs someone to stay, someone to feed it stories, memories, blood if necessary. And you were born with nothing, no attachments, no roots. You were perfect." I choked out the first words I'd said in hours. "Why me?" He leaned in, eyes full of blackness. Because you've always belonged here. You just didn't know it yet. And then he stepped back. The fire behind him flared. The flames curled and twisted into shapes, faces, limbs, symbols I didn't understand. And one word burned itself into the wall above the mantel: CUOS. The room vanished in a blink. Now I stood in a hallway again. 4 doors, no labels, no clues. Just the knowledge that behind one waited escape. Behind another, death. The others, worse. The house wouldn't let me wander anymore. It wanted a choice, a commitment. And somehow, deep inside, I understood the rules. I had to open a door. I had to choose. And the moment I did, the house would take its next shape, its next breath, its next victim, or its next keeper. I stepped forward, hand outstretched, and the door in front of me whispered my name. The whisper curled around my name like a parasite clinging to a dying breath. It didn't sound like one voice, or even many. It sounded like all the voices I'd heard since stepping into this place, layered together into a sound that slithered through the air and straight into my spine. It knew my name not as a label, but as a claim. That door, the second from the left, breathed as I stepped closer, actually breathed. The wood expanded and contracted subtly, as if lungs pressed from behind it. I could feel its heat, its hunger. The knob was old brass, worn smooth from centuries of use, or touch, or worship. I stared at it, my hand hovering just inches away, heart pounding so hard it felt like the house had stolen its rhythm for its own walls. 3 other doors surrounded me, each identical in design but cold, still, silent. They offered no clues, no comfort, no promise of being any better. This wasn't a puzzle, it was a test of instinct, and I didn't trust mine anymore. This house had buried its fingers so deep into my head that I couldn't tell what thoughts were mine and what were planted. But I did know one thing: this door wanted me. That made it dangerous, but maybe also necessary. I turned the knob. It didn't creak. It didn't resist. It welcomed me, swinging open into total darkness. A wind brushed my face, icy and wet like breath exhaled from a freezing corpse. And then light. Not electric, not candle, memory. The room was filled with scenes from my life, projected in midair like flickering film. There was the alley behind my childhood apartment, where I once saw a man hit a dog and leave it bleeding. There was the classroom, where I first realized I was truly alone, even surrounded by people. There was the small studio I'd lived in for years, with empty shelves and quiet nights where no one called. Every moment of sorrow, every crack in my soul was here, floating, exposed. Then I saw her again, the sister I never had, sitting on the swing, laughing, eyes filled with a kind of joy that didn't match the world she lived in. I watched her rise and fall, until suddenly she stopped, mid-air, frozen. Her smile slowly drooped into a frown. Her body lowered gently to the ground, as if lowered by invisible strings. And then she turned to look straight at me. "You let me disappear." I flinched. "You were never real." She tilted her head. "Aren't I?" Behind her, the scenery changed. The swing set dissolved into trees, pine trees, the same woods surrounding the Holloway estate, and now there were footsteps in the leaves. Dozens, surrounding her. But she didn't run. She just stood and pointed. Like the boy, like the girl, like all of them. Pointing not at me, but behind me. I turned, and came face to face with myself, but not quite. This version of me was wrong. Taller, gaunter. His eyes were glassy, lips cracked and bleeding, skin tight over bone. He was whispering something, but I couldn't hear it. His mouth moved fast, like he was stuck in a loop. And then I heard it, faint, beneath the sound of the flickering memories. "Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." I stumbled backward, but the room had no edges anymore. It was endless, a fog that swallowed the floor, the ceiling, the limits of existence. I was floating in a void of my own guilt and past and fear, and it was alive. Then the voice returned, not from the projection of myself, not from the false sister, but from the house itself. "You don't understand the gift we've given you. We're not haunting you. We're building you. I shouted, "What do you want from me?" The voice paused. Then, calmly, cruelly, it answered everything. I ran. No direction. Just away. My feet struck floor that wasn't there. My breath came in panicked bursts, and still the house followed. The projections began to peel apart, melting into walls again. The fog thinned. I crashed through a final veil of shadow and fell into a new room. This one was real. Real in the way that pain is real. Cold, damp, muffled. It was a child's bedroom. Old, untouched, like it had been sealed off for decades. Toys scattered across the floor. A mobile hanging above the bed. The figures twisted into knots. The wallpaper had childlike drawings etched into it, but crude, frantic, like a child trying to explain a nightmare. Houses with teeth, trees with arms. Eyes, always eyes. Then I saw the dresser. One drawer was open, just a crack. Inside, folded and placed with care, was a shirt I remembered. Not from a photo, not from a dream, from real life. My shirt, one I'd lost years ago. Thought I'd donated, and beneath it, more things. My old journal, a broken keychain from college, a letter I'd never sent. This was my room, or the version of it the house had created, had mirrored, had twisted into its own shrine. My hands shook as I picked up the journal. Inside were pages I hadn't written. At least, I didn't remember writing them, and yet each line was in my handwriting. The dates, the voice, the pain, mine. They spoke of coming here, of wanting to stay, of feeling peace, of feeding the house because it was family. And then, at the final page, scrawled like it had been written in blood, "There is no outside. Only rooms we haven't opened yet." Suddenly, the room began to tilt. Slowly at first, then violently. Furniture slid. The bed crashed into the wall. The floor cracked open down the center. And from the split emerged a sound I hadn't heard since the first night. 3 knocks. Measured, purposeful. From below, I screamed. At the house. At the walls. At myself. But the house didn't respond with words. It responded with eyes. All over the walls. In the floor. The ceiling. Human eyes. Some closed. Some weeping. Some full of rage. And all of them looking at me. I ran again. The floor twisting beneath me like the house was trying to decide whether to let me go or swallow me whole. I found the hallway, or what used to be the hallway. Now it was a throat, walls pulsing, mucus slick on the floor. Breathing all around me, I was inside the house, but no longer metaphorically. I was in its body. And then I understood. There is no escape. There is no front door. There is no out. The moment you walk into the Holloway estate, you're already home. I don't know how long I walked. Could have been hours. Could have been minutes. Time didn't behave the same way anymore. It bent, folded, snapped in places. One hallway melted into the next. Staircases spiraled in directions that shouldn't exist, and rooms rearranged themselves behind me like I was trapped in a shifting maze built by a mind gone mad. The walls no longer resembled wood or plaster. They were something else now, soft in places, rigid in others, always warm, like skin, like ribs. I had stopped saying the house in my thoughts. It wasn't a house anymore. It was a body, and I was crawling deeper into it. The breathing followed me, not mine, not human. A low, wheezing inhale that filled the space and then paused, just long enough for me to wonder if it had died, before exhaling again in a wet, gurgling sigh. It echoed through every corridor, every bend. The deeper I went, the more it seemed to come from every direction at once, like I was being swallowed slowly, and the lungs were preparing to close in for the final time. I finally stopped at a door. I didn't remember opening it, didn't remember choosing it, but there it was. Plain, white, wooden. The kind of door you'd find on a child's bedroom in a suburb where nothing bad ever happens. And from behind it, laughter. Not innocent laughter. Too loud. Too manic. Like it had gone on for too long and the person laughing had forgotten why they started. It sent cold straight through my bones. I opened it, and everything changed. It was a dining room, but not mine. Not the one in the Holloway estate I'd seen before. This was warped. The table stretched impossibly long, its surface cluttered with plates, cups, half-eaten food that looked fresh one second and moldy the next. The chairs were full. People sat there, or what was left of them. Some still had faces. Others had skin that had pulled back so tight it split at the cheeks. Hands with too many fingers. Eyes that blinked sideways. One woman was dressed in a wedding gown soaked in something black, smiling down at her plate of what looked like teeth. Another man wore no shirt, his ribs carved with symbols I didn't recognize. They were eating, slowly, mechanical. Some chewed nothing at all. None of them looked at me, not at first. Then the boy, the man now, older than ever, stood at the head of the table and tapped his glass with a single, yellowed spoon. "He's here," he said softly, almost lovingly, and in unison they all turned. Every head, every face, toward me, dozens of pairs of eyes, some too large, some too small, all staring. There was no anger in them, no welcome either, only expectation. The man gestured to the one empty chair. I didn't move. He smiled. "You've come this far. You've tasted it. The walls, the rooms, yourself." I shook my head. "I'm not staying." He raised one eyebrow. "You already have." I turned to run, but the door I came through was gone. Just a wall now. Seamless. Breathing. "You have to eat," said a voice to my left. A young woman with no lips. Her voice was a hiss, a wind sliding over broken glass. "You're starving," said a man across the table. His eyes were missing. Just pits. "You've always been hungry," said a child, face perfectly clean, but her mouth opened too wide and never blinked. My knees gave out. They weren't just talking to me. They were in me. The voice inside my head that had always whispered failure, loneliness, doubt, that had always been them. The house, feeding slowly, patiently, preparing me to return. "I'm not like you," I whispered. The man tilted his head. "But you are." "No," he smiled again, softer this time. Not cruel, almost sad. "Tell me something," he said. "Where were you born?" I opened my mouth. "Nothing." "What street did you grow up on?" "Nothing." "What was your first kiss's name?" "Nothing." His eyes darkened. "You don't remember, do you?" My heart started to race. Of course I do. But I didn't. I couldn't remember anything before arriving at the house. The job I thought I had. The apartment. The memories. They were shadows, shapes behind a fogged window. The more I reached, the more they slipped through. "You were born in this house," he said, walking around the table. "The house made you, fed you pieces of other lives to keep you full. But now it's time for the real thing." He stopped in front of me and held out his hand. On his palm lay something wet, pulsing. My tongue. The real one. I reached up instinctively. My mouth was closed, sewn shut. I hadn't spoken in hours, hadn't even noticed. He stepped back and dropped the tongue onto a plate. "Eat." I refused. He sighed, disappointed but unsurprised. The others stood, together, dozens of bodies moving in mechanical unison. Chairs scraped back. Forks clinked, plates lifted. They marched toward me slowly. Each with a dish, each holding something red and twitching, each prepared to feed me themselves. I backed into a corner. The room grew smaller. The walls curved inward like ribs folding in on a heart, and then a crack. Not from the ceiling, from the floor, a splinter, a tear, a wound in the earth, and through it, a scream, not of pain, of freedom. A woman's voice, sharp, commanding, real. The room shook. The plates fell. The man snarled and turned toward the sound. The others hissed, clutched their heads, moaned. The crack widened, light poured in, and from below, a hand reached through. Her hand. The sister. The one who wasn't real. Yet now was the only real thing left. She looked straight at me. This time, no pointing, no warning. Just a single word, her mouth finally unstitched, "Jump." I didn't hesitate. I dove through the crack. The table burst apart behind me. The guests howled. The man screamed something ancient and broken. And then everything was white. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in a room. I was in the woods, outside the Holloway estate. But the house was gone, not burned, not collapsed, just never there. The trees stood tall, the wind was still, birds chirped, and my tongue was in my mouth again. I should have felt free. But as I walked back to the road, something trailed behind me. Shadows, whispers, footsteps that matched mine, half a second late. The house wasn't gone. It had moved, and now it was inside me. It followed me, even in the quiet, even under a normal sky with birds that sang and sunlight that filtered through the trees. I felt it, like a knot between my shoulder blades, a cold thread winding through my spine. The house wasn't behind me anymore. Yet every step I took away from the clearing where it once stood made me feel less free, not more. The air didn't hum with menace, not outwardly. But something had changed in the way the wind touched the trees, the way shadows lingered too long under branches. The world was pretending to be normal, but I knew better. I felt better, and that was the worst part. The road back into town should have taken an hour to walk, maybe less, but it took me nearly 3. Time distorted, or I did. The woods never quite ended, not when they should have. Paths curved in loops. Fallen logs I passed once appeared again, only this time aged with moss. The birds stopped singing at one point, all at once, like they had seen something coming. Eventually, I reached Barrow Creek, or something wearing its skin. The gas station stood where it always had, weather, worn, buzzing with the tired flicker of fluorescent lights. The convenience store windows glared too bright in the sun. But everything was wrong. Subtle wrong. The kind you could only sense if you'd been hollowed out and stretched like I had. The parking lot was too still. The rust on the sign hadn't deepened since I left. The same song played on the radio inside, skipping in exactly the same place. And the cashier, his face. It was smiling before I even stepped inside. "Welcome back," he said without looking up. I froze in the doorway. "I've never been here before," I answered carefully. He finally looked at me, and his eyes, those eyes, weren't his. They were mine. Pale. Hollowed. Reflecting something I couldn't stand to face. He blinked slowly, the way something imitating a person might do after watching a human for too long. "Sure you haven't." I left, I ran. Barrow Creek was a shell. The streets were too quiet, the houses too still, and the people, those that moved, did so like clock hands. Precision without purpose. They didn't speak to me. They didn't look at each other. They all wore the same smile, too tight at the corners. It was like walking through a dream that had forgotten how to end. At one point, I passed a woman gardening, kneeling by her flower bed, trimming petunias that looked too bright to be real. She turned to me. "Beautiful day," she said, snipping a stem. Not like the Old House Days hymn. I stopped. "Do you know Holloway Estate?" She didn't answer with words, just pointed with her shears at me. "Now it knows you." I backed away. Her grin didn't fade. I made it to the sheriff's office next. I needed answers. I needed anything that told me I hadn't fractured beyond repair. The door creaked open like an old memory, and the same scent hit me. Paper, dust, a faint trace of blood. Sheriff Keller sat behind the desk, sipping from a coffee mug. He looked up with surprise that felt staged. "Thought you went missing," he said, blinking too slow. I was at the Holloway place," I managed. He paused. "What place?" "The Holloway Estate. You know what I'm talking about." His lips pressed together, and he turned to his old filing cabinet. "Don't have anything by that name." He pulled open a drawer. It was empty. No records. No property deeds. No missing persons. Strange, isn't it? The walls inched closer. I took a step back. He smiled. "They forget when they leave," he said softly. "Unless it wants to be remembered." I ran again. Not away this time. Toward something. A church. A ruin. A highway. I didn't care. I just needed something that didn't breathe behind its walls. The library caught my eye. It had always looked abandoned, and maybe that was why I trusted it now. Inside, the lights flickered. Dust thick on shelves. Books left in piles, open and mid-read. like whoever touched them had simply vanished. But it was quiet, honest quiet. No breathing walls, no smiling faces. I sat at a terminal, hands trembling. Searched Holloway Estate. No results. Searched my own name, nothing. The keyboard clacked louder than it should. Then a pop-up appeared. A chat window. No internet. No network. Just 5 words. Do you miss us yet? I slammed the laptop shut. Behind me, a book fell. Hard, purposeful. I turned. The book lay open on its spine, pages flared wide like wings. The title, The Ones Who Stayed, a history of those who remember the house I picked it up. Inside were photographs. The boy, the girl, the faceless man at the table, the woman in the wedding dress, and on the final page, me, standing at the door, smiling. Beneath it, a caption, "He lives here now." I dropped the book. The shelves began to shift, creaking like ribs. The lights flickered out, and then I heard it, knocking, 3 times. From the inside of the walls. I ran from the library, lungs burning. Streets now empty. Not just quiet, empty. Cars sat abandoned. Lights blinked with no power. I screamed, "Oh, I want it!" And the town answered. All of it, with a whisper that came from every wall, every streetlight, every locked door. "You let us in." I fell to my knees. Not out of fear, but because I realized what had happened. I never left. The moment I stepped through that door at Holloway Estate, I was inside forever. The house didn't exist in one place. It was a place. It became a person. It wears me now, my smile, my memories, my face. And it walks out of the woods, looking for someone else. Someone just like you. It was wearing my face. That truth throbbed in my skull like a second heartbeat. Not a theory, not a fear. A fact. Something had climbed out of the Holloway Estate when I jumped into that crack. Something that peeled me open and stepped inside like a new coat. And now it was walking through Barrow Creek. Being me, while whatever I was now drifted somewhere in between. The world still looked the same, but the rules were gone. It felt like I was seeing everything from behind a thick sheet of glass, like my body was 1 second behind the real moment. Forever out of sync. My reflection didn't follow me anymore. When I turned my head, the mirror image paused a little too long before catching up. I noticed it first in the windows, then in the puddles on the sidewalk, and worst of all, in the photographs. I found one on a bulletin board outside the community center. A smiling group shot of townsfolk I didn't recognize, frozen mid-laughter during some long, forgotten festival. But right there, near the edge of the crowd, nearly cropped out, was me. Not just someone who looked like me. Me. Same expression, same shirt, same slight scar on my right temple from when I fell off my bike as a kid. Except I'd never been to that event. I reached for the photo with trembling hands, trying to rip it down. But the moment I touched the glass, I was somewhere else. Not physically, not fully. But my mind jolted into the memory of that photograph, and it felt like mine. The air smelled like popcorn and sweat. I could hear the distant crackle of fireworks. I could feel someone's hand gripping mine. A woman. Her nails were short, her palm warm, and I knew her. Deep down, the way you know a dream when you wake up, even if the details slip away. Her name was gone. I blinked and staggered back, the photo falling from my hands, fluttering to the ground like dead skin. When I looked again, I was no longer in it. Not me. Not the Doppelganger. Just empty space where I'd stood. As if I'd never been part of it at all. That's when I realized it wasn't just wearing my face. It was replacing me. Everywhere. Quietly. One photograph at a time. One memory at a time. I rushed to the town archive building. It had always been locked up and half abandoned, mostly used for records nobody cared about. Dust. History. Birth certificates no one ever read. But now, it felt urgent. I needed to know if I still existed. The clerk at the front was unfamiliar. Gray sweater. Thin hair. A name tag that said Tom. He didn't look at me as I approached. "I need records," I said, trying to sound steady. "Property records. Personal. Census. Anything." Tom didn't blink. Didn't move. Just said all rooms lead home. What? He looked up, and it was my face. Not fully, distorted. Warped. Like someone tried to sculpt it from wax and got the nose wrong. But unmistakable. I backed away. He stood. Every joint cracked as he moved. I lived in that house too, he said. Long before it had a name. Long before it learned how to whisper. What is it? I asked. Tom smiled with teeth like chipped bone. A parasite. A parent. A place that got tired of being empty. He stepped closer. It feeds on history. Memory. And when it's full, it doesn't rot. It grows. You're not its prisoner. He leaned in. You're its limb. I turned and ran. The streets blurred as I moved. Storefronts stretched like melted wax. Lights blinked in erratic pulses. The world no longer followed rules. The house had moved into the town. No, it had spread through it, like mold on the walls of reality. And no one else noticed, because maybe they were already part of it. Or maybe they never existed outside of it in the first place. I fled to the one place I hadn't returned to since escaping. The clearing, where the Holloway estate had once stood. But this time, something was there. Not the house. A frame. 4 walls, no roof, no windows. Just a skeletal outline of where the house had been. Like the earth remembered its shape even if it was no longer real. I stepped into it, and the air changed. Still. Cold. Heavy. A voice echoed across the clearing. Windless but clear. You came back. Good. I turned, and there it stood. Me, perfectly me. Hair. Eyes. Posture. It smiled and spoke again. Ready to come home. I shook my head. I never left. It nodded. Yes, you never did. And then I felt it. A tearing behind my eyes. A pull inside my chest. Like I was being unraveled thought by thought. Memories fled. Names dissolved. My parents' faces. My childhood dog. My first love. All eaten like pages torn from a diary and devoured. And the thing wearing my face stepped forward. You're not the original, it said gently. You never were. I dropped to my knees. It crouched in front of me. There's always been a version of you here. Some make it out. Most fade. But a few it touched my chest. A few go deeper. I screamed. Not out loud. Inside. Everything went white again. Not light. Absence. And in that blank, sterile void, I saw them. All the versions of me. Stacked. Layered. Some smiling. Some crying. Some silent, curled up like infants in corners of forgotten rooms. And one of them stood. Older. Eyes gone. Mouth stitched. He reached out. Placed a hand on my shoulder. And whispered a single word into the space where my name should have been. Stay. When I woke again, I was in my apartment. Clean. Modern. Sunlight through the window. My phone buzzed. A text from someone I didn't remember meeting. You ready for tomorrow? I had no clue what they meant. My walls were covered in framed photos. Friends. Smiles. Laughter. Me. I couldn't remember a single one. And in every picture, if I looked long enough, behind the group, near a door, behind glass, there it was. The house, blurry, waiting, smiling. I stared at the picture for a long time. Longer than I meant to. Longer than I should have. A framed memory on my wall, in a place I didn't recognize. Surrounded by people I didn't know. Yet all of them holding me close like family. And in the background, half hidden, out of focus, almost mistaken for a smudge, there it was. That same crooked door. The door from the Holloway estate. But here's the thing, it wasn't in a wall. It wasn't even part of the house. It just stood there unattached, planted like a tumor in the middle of a perfect, sunny backyard barbecue. A door without a frame, leading to nowhere, and casting a shadow in the wrong direction. I blinked and looked again. It was still there. I took the photo off the wall and flipped it over. No writing. No date. No hint of who had taken it or where. Just a plain cardboard back and 2 metal teeth holding it in place. I pried open the frame, hands shaking more than I expected, and pulled the photograph free. The image was printed on thick, textured paper, the kind they used in old film development. I brought it closer to my face. The door was clearer now. It was watching me. Not with eyes, not directly, but with presence. with a familiarity that made my stomach knot. I hadn't escaped. I'd spread. The house had hollowed me out and walked me into this new life like it was checking off a box. Integrate self, it might have written. Become the memory. Erase the witness. Let him believe he's free. But I wasn't free. I didn't even know what free meant anymore. I turned to the other photos. There were dozens, all framed, all hung neatly around the apartment. Every single one included that door, sometimes at the edge of a crowd, sometimes in the distance behind a curtain or a window, sometimes closer, sometimes so close it felt like the camera was trying to catch its breath as it clicked the shutter. And sometimes, just sometimes, it was open. I dropped the photo. The glass shattered against the hardwood floor. My phone buzzed again. New text, we're outside.
Ready when you are!
I didn't move. Another buzz.
Come on! You said you were feeling better.
Feeling better. Had I been sick? I didn't remember ever being sick. I didn't remember anything. I checked the contacts on my phone. None of the names felt familiar. There were messages, photos, memories I had no part in creating. Yet there I was, smiling in all of them, laughing, holding hands. Standing in crowds that never saw the door behind them. I opened my front door. 2 people waited on the sidewalk. Both waved enthusiastically. Both wore smiles too wide, eyes too bright, the kind you only see in mannequins and nightmares. I shut the door, locked it, turned around, and the hallway behind me had changed. It no longer led to my bedroom or kitchen. Now it led to the attic. The same narrow stairway from Holloway. Same crooked steps. Same flickering light bulb dangling from a wire that shouldn't be there. It hadn't followed me. It had always been here. This life, this apartment, this town. They weren't the escape. They were the next room. The door at the top of the stairs creaked open on its own. A gentle invitation. A slow exhale. And I realized then what the house had always been doing. It wasn't trapping people. It was collecting them, room by room, memory by memory, folding them into its own walls until there was no difference between the prisoner and the place. I walked up the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The air grew tighter, more humid. The light above flickered in sync with my heartbeat. When I reached the top, I paused. Inside was a mirror, one of those tall, antique ones with the iron frame and fogged glass. But this time, it didn't show me. It showed him. The version of me that had stayed behind. The one that had fully become the house. He stood there, hands clasped behind his back, face calm. And he smiled. I wondered how long it would take you, he said. But now you understand. No, I whispered. I'm not part of you. I escaped. You think you did, he replied. But the house doesn't let people go. It extends them. And now, he raised a hand, snapped his fingers. Behind me, the door slammed shut. The lights went out. Darkness. Then whispers. Hundreds of them. All in my voice. All saying the same thing. One more room. One more room. One more room. When the lights returned, the mirror was a window. And through it, I saw another life. Another version of me. Different city. Different friends. But always the same ending. A door. Alone. Watching. I stepped forward. The mirror didn't resist. And as I passed through it, I understood the truth. The Holloway house never needed to survive in one place. It survives in people. It builds room after room inside us, invisible, until one day we open a door we've never seen before and step right back in. The mirror closed behind me without a sound, leaving only the faint scent of dust and rotting wood in its place. But this room, this new version of me, was different. It wasn't filled with dread. No creaking floors or clawing shadows. It was comfortable, warm, the kind of soft, muted calm that makes your brain slow down and accept things without question. And that was the most dangerous part. If this was my new home, it was mine in the way a trap belongs to the creature it captures. Everything was familiar, but not remembered. The couch sagged in the exact same way my old one did. The bookshelf held all my favorite titles, but only the covers. Inside, each page was blank. as if the house had built the illusion of comfort from the outside in, too lazy or too confident to bother with the details. And there, on the wall above the television, hung a large framed print. Not art, a blueprint of a house. At first glance, it looked like a standard architectural sketch. Measurements, room labels, stair placements. But the longer I looked, the more I saw what shouldn't be there. Hallways that looped back into themselves. Bedrooms labeled with names I didn't recognize. One section simply called the mouth. Another marked memories in use. And then there was a tiny, nearly invisible label in the corner of the page: Ver 9 model inhabitant fully installed. I staggered backward, heart thudding. Ver 9, 9th version. Of me, I sprinted to the closet. I didn't know why. Only that something screamed it wasn't just a closet anymore. I yanked the door open, and inside, hanging from a rusted chain, was a single bulb swinging above a narrow spiral staircase that descended far deeper than any building should allow. The air changed immediately. It pressed in thick and damp, each breath a slow swallow of must. The stairs groaned beneath my weight, not in protest, but anticipation. They wanted to feel me descend, to welcome me down, and I went, of course, because I had to know what was beneath this version of the house. When I reached the bottom, the hallway was narrow. The walls weren't made of wood or stone. They were textured, soft, fleshy. It was a corridor made of the same pulsing, living tissue I'd felt behind the walls of Holloway. Only now, it wasn't hiding anymore. Along the wall were windows. But they didn't show outside. They showed me. Not reflections, other versions. In each window, a different life. One where I was married. One where I was a teacher. One where I lived in a city I didn't recognize. And in every version, the same thing happened. I'd smile. I'd go home. I'd open a door that hadn't been there the day before. And the house would begin. I ran past them, each one a ghost I could have become. But I could feel the walls tightening, the corridor getting smaller, the lights dimming. The deeper I went, the more the house fought back, until I reached the final door. Black, no handle, just a brass plate that read, "Final version, root memory." I pressed my palm to it. The door dissolved, and beyond it was a room, empty, except for a chair. And sitting in the chair was me, not smiling, not possessed, just tired, older, gaunt, like he hadn't slept in years. He looked up. "You found it," he said. "Found what?" "The origin. The first you. Or at least, the one that started this path." I shook my head. "What are you talking about?" He sighed. "The house doesn't haunt people. It builds them. It copies them. Room by room. Choice by choice. It grows by remembering who we think we are and making better versions. Stronger. Funnier. Smarter. More likable. Until the real us is just a prototype rotting in the basement." "Are you saying you're the real me?" He laughed. A small, bitter sound. I was. He stood. "But now you are." The walls pulsed. A groan echoed through the foundation. Something deep and old had awakened. "I tried to fight it," he continued. "Tried to erase it. Tried to forget. But the house doesn't die. It just remodels." He held out a knife. Old, simple, bone, handled. Only one version can leave. Only one of us can walk out of here and make it to the next life. I stepped back. "I'm not doing this. You already are." And then he lunged. We collided hard, the knife slicing across my shoulder. The pain was bright, real, grounding. I shoved him back. But he moved with the kind of desperation that doesn't come from hate. It comes from knowing you don't get another chance. We fought. Fists. Elbows. Nails. Each strike felt like I was beating a part of myself. Because I was. When I finally pinned him down, the knife fell between us. He looked at me with bloodied lips, eyes dull. "Do it," he whispered. "It won't stop until you do. I don't want to become you. Too late." And then he smiled. But this time it wasn't his face. It was the boy's. The one from the first night. His eyes went black. The skin cracked. The voice distorted. And the house revealed itself, not in body but in intent. "I am you," it said through his mouth. Woe mar bielt far mini. The room shook, the walls blood, the knife glowed. I grabbed it, raised it, and darkness, silence. When I woke again, I was in a room. No blood, no mirror, no copies, just me, alone. I checked the walls. No breathing, no watching. The blueprint was gone, but etched into the floor, carved deep, were the words version 10 initialized. The house had not lost, it had merely updated. And now I was walking out of it again, smiling at strangers, waving at neighbors, attending parties I had no memory of planning. A perfect resident, a finished product. But somewhere beneath the calm, I knew the house was watching, building the next me, and someday soon another door would appear. It began again, quietly, as it always does. A door appearing where no door should be. This time, it was in the break room at the job I never remembered applying for. Between the microwave and the vending machine, someone had scrawled a note on the wall in pen, STAFONLYDONTR. But the thing is, I was staff, wasn't I? At least, that's what the ID badge clipped to my shirt said. And even if I wasn't, the door was already open a crack, just wide enough to let something out. A draft, a hum, a whisper. They always start with the whisper. I told myself I wouldn't touch it. I promised myself I wouldn't step through again. Wouldn't entertain the game the house wanted to play. But I also knew the house never really waited for permission. The longer I stood there staring, the more I realized something wasn't quite right about the room around me. The coffee in the pot hadn't moved since I walked in. The steam off the kettle was frozen mid-air. The man at the corner table, what was his name? Brian? Blake? Sat with his eyes open, mid-blink, not moving, not even breathing. The house had already found me again. It wasn't a door anymore. It was a summons. I stepped through. The instant I did, time snapped back into motion behind me. I could hear the chatter resume, the hum of the vending machine kicking in again, but none of it reached me now. I was elsewhere. A hallway, narrow, carpeted in something thick and red, like clotted velvet. Paintings lined the walls, portraits of faces I almost recognized, old classmates, co-workers, lovers. All slightly wrong, eyes too deep, set. Smiles that never quite touched the corners. And in each of their backgrounds, there it was again. The door, the open one, the one I was always walking toward. This hallway felt older, more aware, like it remembered every step I'd ever taken. The walls whispered, not words, not language, but the echo of memory, like breath being pulled from my lungs and used to tell stories I couldn't understand. And then, at the end of the hall, something knew a desk. Behind it sat a man in a dark suit, not smiling, not blinking, just waiting. The plaque on the desk read, Architect of the Echo Rooms. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat, not because I trusted him, but because I didn't see another choice. That was the genius of the house. You always thought you had agency, when in truth, it had already mapped your path. Every refusal, every rebellion, it accounted for all of it. It relished it. You've been upgraded, the architect said flatly. Upgraded, version 10, high memory retention, stable personality profile, recursive awareness. What the hell does that mean? He flipped a file open. Inside were pages of notes, my life or some facsimile of it, dates, locations, interactions. Underlined phrases like emotional trigger response, guilt, and adaptive disassociation reached threshold at iteration 7. You're a better version now, he said, but you're still unfinished. Unfinished for what? He looked up, and for a second, I thought I saw the boy again behind his eyes. That gleam, that echo of laughter trying to claw through skin. To be the builder, he said. You've lived the house, survived its rooms, remembered the rooms it wants you to forget. You've seen its hunger, you've tasted its plan. Now it wants you to help. Help build what? The next one. He gestured behind him, where the wall shimmered, then melted away, revealing blueprints. Thousands, hung like laundry across a field of nothingness, each one an entire life. A version of someone, not just me anymore. Others. Faces I'd never seen, but suddenly recognized. A woman who cried alone in a hospital room. A boy who vanished on a school trip. A man who never came back from war, but whose body was never found. They weren't just victims. They were foundations. The house doesn't just trap people, he said. It breeds them. From trauma, from memory, from every open-ended question a mind can't let go of. He stood. You're going to help it build more doors. I stood too, fists clenched. No. Yes, he said, not threatening, just stating. You're already doing it. Every time you remember. Every time you dream. The house uses you as a doorway. I backed away, heart pounding. I'm not like you. I can stop this. I can stop it. He nodded slowly, then smiled. You can try. But ask yourself this, have you ever told someone about it? I froze, because yes, I had. And they never remembered. Not clearly. Not fully. They would nod. Smile politely. Forget the conversation minutes later. Like it had slipped through their minds like water through a crack. No matter how much I shouted, no matter how vivid the memory, the house wasn't just feeding on me. It was editing the world around me. You are not the story's end, the architect said, stepping aside. You are its threshold. Behind him, a door waited. The same door. Always the same. I turned to run. But the hallway behind me was gone, replaced by walls of pulsing skin. Every step I took forward, the door pulsed with light. With hunger, I opened it, because there was nowhere else left. And on the other side, a child's room, toys scattered, curtains drawn. And on the floor, playing with blocks, was a little boy with dark eyes and a crooked smile. He looked up at me and said, "Daddy." And that's when I knew what the house had done. It hadn't built a new me. It had built a seed. Something to grow. Something to inherit the blueprints. Because the house didn't just want to exist. It wanted to be born. And I had already passed it on. The word shattered something inside me. Not from fear, but from recognition. "Daddy," he had said, with that soft, uncertain voice only a child could produce, and for one split second, I wanted to believe it. I wanted it to be real. That somehow, in all this madness, I'd been dropped into a life that offered meaning, that this room, this child, was a second chance. But I knew better. That one word didn't feel like love. It felt like bait. He sat cross-legged, building a crooked tower of wooden blocks, each carved with letters that didn't belong in any alphabet. His eyes flicked up at me, too wide for his face, the whites almost luminescent in the gloom of the room. Behind him, the wallpaper peeled in long vertical strips like shedding skin, revealing what looked like exposed muscle beneath, twitching faintly, almost breathing. He tilted his head and smiled. "Are you going to help me build?" "Daddy." I didn't answer, because deep down I knew what he was asking. He wasn't asking for toys or towers. He was asking me to help build the next house, the next maze, the next trap, and he wanted me to believe it was mine, that it came from me, that he came from me. I stepped back, but the door was gone. Of course it was. This room was the new beginning, a nursery for infection, a cradle for something old pretending to be new. He stood slowly, wobbling like a normal child might, but there was nothing human about the way he moved. It was too perfect, too rehearsed. He walked toward me, holding one of the blocks in his small hand, offering it like a peace token. On its surface was a symbol, twisted, looping wrong. My mind couldn't translate it, but my body reacted. My skin crawled. My stomach turned. I reached for the block despite myself, and the moment I touched it, I was somewhere else, in the air above the room. Looking down, a floating observer watching the pieces of the house fit together. There were thousands of them. Not just rooms. People. Each one a hallway, each one a door. Some aware, most not. All connected. And at the center, the boy, the seedling, smiling up at me with that crooked mouth, eyes full of blueprints. I dropped the block. I hit the ground hard. My body shook, covered in sweat. And the boy, whatever he really was now standing just inches from me. "You built me," he said gently. I was born when you opened your first door. No, I whispered. You're a trick. You're not real. He blinked slowly, disappointed. I'm more real than you ever were. The room darkened. Not by dimming lights. There were none, but by thickening. The space itself grew dense, folding inward, breathing in like lungs preparing to scream. And then the floor opened. Not a hole, a mouth. Lips of splintered wood. Teeth of jagged iron nails. Tongue made of coiled staircase leading downward. The boy looked at me, hand outstretched. It's time to build, Daddy. I shook my head. I'm not building anything. His smile dropped. You already have. And then the floor, mouth spoke. Not in words, but in visions. Memories I hadn't made, but had lived. The woman in the wedding dress. The girl with her mouth sewn shut. The version of me with no eyes, no voice, only rage. All of them. Versions, designs, echoes. I wasn't just a victim of the house. I was its architect's apprentice. Every time I remembered it, every time I feared it, I gave it new walls, new blood, new breath. And now it wanted me to finish the job, to pass the plans to the next generation, to raise the seedling into the new structure. The boy grabbed my hand, and in that moment I saw it all. Every house, every hallway, all versions of Holloway stacked across time and space, flickering in and out like unstable realities. The house in the woods, the house in the mirror, the house behind the vending machine. All doors, all me. I pulled my hand free and screamed, no more. The room reacted like a kicked beast. Walls cracked, the floor mouth howled. The boy's face twisted, the facade breaking, his eyes going black, his voice shattering into 100 others, each one a version of mine. You belong to us. I ran. Through the mouth, down the coiled stair tongue, deeper. Into the dark that writhed and pulsed. I didn't know where it would take me, but I knew staying meant becoming the thing the house wanted, and I would not raise its child. Not willingly. Not yet. At the bottom, I found a hallway. Not red, not breathing. Just plain. Ordinary. It ended at a door, one I hadn't seen before. No brass knob, no symbols, just wood, and carved into it, in plain letters, EXIT. I reached for it, heart racing, knowing it couldn't be that simple, that it wouldn't let me just walk out. But when my hand touched the door, it was cold, genuinely cold, like outside, like air. I turned the handle, it opened, bright light poured in. Real sunlight. I stepped through, and gasped. I was back in my childhood home, the one I hadn't seen in 20 years. And there, sitting at the kitchen table, was my mother, alive, smiling. Hey there, she said. You look tired. I stared at her, unsure, unsteady. What is this? She poured me coffee. The smell was perfect. Just breakfast, honey. You always forget breakfast. On the table sat a newspaper. The date was today. The world outside the window looked normal. But in the far distance, barely visible behind the trees, I saw it. The outline. The crooked roof. The shifting windows. The door. It was still here, and it had let me go. Which meant only one thing. It was done with me. But it wasn't done building. I didn't drink the coffee. That was the first decision I made with clarity in days. Maybe weeks, maybe years. I couldn't tell anymore. The smell was too perfect. Not nostalgic, not familiar, engineered. It had the warmth of comfort, but the precision of design. It didn't just remind me of my mother's kitchen, it reconstructed it. Exactly. Every crack in the linoleum, every chip in the yellow, tiled counter. Even the scuff mark on the edge of the fridge from the time I swung a bat inside during a thunderstorm. The house remembered, and now it was feeding the memory back to me like a reward for obedience. She watched me with soft eyes and that tired, gentle smile, a perfect replica. But there was something wrong about her mouth. It didn't quite move when she spoke. It opened, but the words seemed to rise from somewhere else. A speaker behind her face, a delay I wouldn't have noticed before. But now I did. I noticed everything. I sat in the chair across from her. It creaked just like I remembered. She slid the coffee closer. You need your strength, she said. I looked down into the mug. The surface didn't ripple, didn't steam. It was thick, unmoving, still, like the room was holding its breath, waiting for me to accept what I already knew. "This isn't real," I said softly. She blinked, slow and careful. "It is if you choose it to be." The room dimmed slightly, like the walls were reacting to my rejection. The edges of things softened. Shadows thickened. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "You let me go." "Why bring me here?" Her smile didn't falter. "I didn't bring you here, sweetheart. You came back." My stomach nodded. I walked through the EXIT. "Did you?" she asked. "Or did you choose the illusion that hurt least?" I stood. The chair scraped violently across the floor, echoing too loud in a space that shouldn't echo at all. "Where's the house?" I demanded. "Where's the boy?" Her head tilted slightly. A flicker of something passed over her face, like static on an old TV screen. For a moment, her skin looked paper, thin, sagging like it was ready to peel off. But it settled, reformed, returned to normal. She stood too, now eye level with me. "It's not about where the house is," she said. "It's about where it isn't. And right now, that place is you." The walls shifted behind her. The kitchen door vanished. The window went black. No trees, no sun, no sky. Just endless, suffocating black. And then, just as sudden, we were in a new room. No transition, no walking. One blink, and everything had changed. Now I stood in the holloway foyer again. Only older, dustier, ruined. The chandelier had fallen, shattered in the middle of the floor. The wallpaper had peeled so far back it exposed the wooden skeleton beneath. Bloodstains like dried rivers trailed down the staircase. The house looked dead, but I knew it wasn't. The air was alive with something quiet and twitching, like it had buried its pulse beneath the floorboards, waiting. I turned slowly. My mother was gone. In her place, the boy. Again, always him. But now he was shrinking, not physically, not in size, in presence. Where once he filled the room with wrongness and dread, now he seemed small, tired, fragile. He looked up at me. "Do you remember the first time?" he asked. I said nothing. "The first door you opened. The first time you felt that pull." My mouth was dry. "It was here, in the hallway," he nodded. "You didn't see it, but I was already waiting on the other side." He stepped forward, and the room around us shimmered. Walls peeled away, revealing not the bones of a house, but the structure of me. My memories, my regrets, projected outward like blueprints on flesh. A room where I buried my guilt. A hallway built from silence. A closet filled with all the conversations I never had. It had never just built a home. It had built a replica of my mind. "You weren't the first," he said, almost kindly. "But you're the one who stayed the longest. You walked all the way through. You finished the cycle. That's why you're different." I shook my head. "I'm not finishing anything. I'm ending it." He looked up again. "You can't end a house made of memory." "Then I'll burn it down," I said. "Memory, mind, whatever it is. I'll tear every room out with my own hands." He smiled, and this time it was genuine. "Then you'll need the blueprint." The room shattered. Not physically, but in sensation. One moment, I was standing. The next, I was falling through myself. Images ripped through my mind. Memories I never owned. Lives I never lived, but versions of me had. I saw myself living in different towns, opening different doors, being someone else. Each life a variation, a test, a fragment, and in all of them, always, the house waited. Until it didn't. Until one version walked away. Until one version turned around and came back. Me. I landed hard, back in the study, where the journal still sat. Only now it was open, the pages filled. And scrawled across the final one, in letters that bled, "You've seen the rooms. Now build the walls." I slammed it shut. The walls groaned. The floor cracked. The boy, my shadow, watched with hollow eyes. "It's your house now," he whispered. "No," I said. I grabbed the journal and tore it in half. Then again, page by page, until all that remained was confetti. The room groaned like a wounded animal. The boy fell to his knees. The walls split down the center. A light poured through, a true light, not fabricated, not filtered, and I ran. Through the breach, out of the house, into the unknown, the real unknown, the kind not shaped by walls or whispers, where the sky didn't bend, where nothing smiled unless it meant it. I didn't look back, because for the first time, I wasn't part of the house, and the house was no longer part of me. But even then, even with sunlight on my skin, I couldn't shake one thought. If the house lives in memory, then who's to say it didn't just move into yours? I wish I could say there was peace after that, that the lights stayed, that the air smelled of something other than old wood and rot. I wish I could say I escaped. That would be the neat ending, wouldn't it? Man confronts the nightmare, tears it down, walks into the sunrise. But no, that's not what happened. That's never what happens. Because memory is not a place you can walk away from. Memory is not a hallway you can seal off. It's a living thing, a door. And once it knows your name, it follows. The sky was blue when I emerged, so blue it made my eyes ache. Too vibrant. Too loud. After all the gray, after all the flesh-colored walls and pulsing light bulbs, this shade of blue felt aggressive. I stood in the middle of an empty road. Trees on either side, tall and indifferent. Birds chirped with no rhythm. The wind didn't hum. It howled. And then silence again. I walked. Where was I going? No idea. But forward felt like the only direction. My legs moved without permission, and my mind trailed behind, stumbling to keep up. I passed mile markers without numbers, signposts with no names. Every landmark seemed familiar, but just slightly off. A world rebuilt from photos I hadn't posed for. And then I saw it. The door, standing in the middle of a cornfield, no house around it, no hinges, no wall, just a door. Old, wooden, painted white once, though the paint had long since peeled away in jagged streaks like veins. It cast no shadow. I stopped. My mouth went dry. No, I turned away. But the moment I looked forward again, it was there. Closer. I hadn't heard it move. Hadn't seen it shift. But it had moved. I turned again. Now it was behind me. Closer still. I ran. I don't know how far. I didn't care. But the sky began to crack. At first, I thought it was a hallucination. Fatigue. Some last cruel joke from a dying imagination. But no. The clouds above split. Clean fractures. Jagged white lines cutting across the heavens like broken porcelain. And behind the cracks, rooms. Hallways. Eyes. The house was inside the sky now. Watching. I screamed. Not out of fear.
Out of defiance. Oh, we're not a rail.
And the cornfield answered. A chorus of whispers. Hundreds of voices. All in my tone. All saying the same thing. We are now. Then the door opened. Not toward me. Into me. And from inside stepped something that should have stayed buried. It was my shadow, but bloated, stretched. Like someone took every bad moment I ever lived and fed it until it walked upright. Its face was mine, but longer. Skin gray. Mouth cracked and drooling something black. It didn't speak. It didn't have to. I understood. It was the residue. The rot left behind. The part of me that had built the house. And now it wanted back in. I ran again. This time into town. Whatever town it was. Everything blurred. People stared but didn't help. They never do. Not with this kind of horror. This wasn't violence. It wasn't madness. It was architecture. The reshaping of identity, of place, of meaning. I made it into a bookstore. Old narrow aisles. Shelves that reached too high. I hid. Behind encyclopedias. Useless pages full of knowledge that couldn't save me. And the door appeared again, between two shelves. Open. Mocking. Inside, I saw a bedroom. My childhood bedroom. Pristine. Frozen in time. Posters on the wall. A baseball glove. The desk where I once carved my initials. And my younger self, sitting on the edge of the bed, crying. He looked up. I didn't mean to open it, he sobbed. I stared. He was real, or real enough. His hands shook. There was just this sound, and I followed it. What did you see? I asked him. His eyes went wide. The same thing you did, but I stayed. And I realized then. The house didn't find me when I was older. It had touched me first when I was a child. and I'd forgotten. Buried it. Erased it like a dream after waking. But the door had never shut. It had waited. This version of me had never left. He'd sat here, trapped in the room behind the door, crying for decades, while I walked around believing I'd moved on. "You have to kill it," I said. He nodded. "But it's not outside anymore." He pointed to his own chest. "It's in here." And then the door slammed shut between us. Locked. "Gone," I screamed, pounded the floor, tore the books from the shelves. No one in the store even flinched. They walked around me like I wasn't there, because maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was only visiting again. Another version, another room. My phone buzzed. No service, no number. Just one message, version 11 loading. I stared at the screen, and then the lights in the bookstore flickered. Books turned to bricks, shelves to pillars, carpet to hardwood, and I knew I was in the house again. It had disguised itself better this time. More subtle, more polite, but the rules hadn't changed. There is always a door. There is always a version. And the more I fight, the more I build. Room by room, word by word, memory by memory, maybe even now, as you read this, a door is forming behind you, because that's what the house wants now. To spread, to follow, to be remembered. The house no longer needs an address, not anymore. It doesn't wait behind rusted gates, or in overgrown forests, or at the end of forgotten roads. It doesn't beg to be found or hidden behind superstition. Now it waits in moments, in you. It has refined itself, grown smarter, quieter, subtler. It plants its roots not in land, but in memory. And it doesn't need to be built anymore, because it remembers itself through every person it touches. That was the truth I learned far too late. I don't recall walking into this version. That's the most terrifying part. There was no door, no sudden shift, no trap. One moment I was at a bus stop, rain curling down the glass, watching people shuffle by like ghosts wrapped in wet jackets. And then the next, I was inside. The bench beneath me was gone. The people vanished. The streetlights flickered into chandeliers, and the sidewalk stretched into hardwood. Seamless, painless, familiar. And that's how I knew. The house had learned how to skip the entrance. It was building itself directly into my days now. The window beside me showed the same street, but frozen, like a painting left out in the weather. No movement, no cars, just stillness. Even the raindrops on the glass were locked in place, as if the world had paused to watch what would happen next. And I knew, deep in my marrow, that nothing I was seeing was real. Not anymore. The hallway stretched before me, long, narrow, gently lit, as if welcoming, as if it had done away with fear and was now trying something else. Comfort. I walked slowly. Each step made no sound. That was new. The floors didn't creak. There were no groans of aging wood, no distant whispers, no dread humming in the walls. Instead, there was laughter. Not loud, not sinister, just delicate. The kind of laughter that belongs to childhood, before fear has shape, before grief has meaning. I followed it without wanting to. My legs moved not because of will, but because they remembered. They'd walked this corridor before. And at the end of it, the laughter sharpened into something more distinct. My name laughed, softly, gently, as though spoken by someone who loved me. The door at the end was slightly ajar, just enough to see light spill from the crack like gold smoke. My heart thudded, not from terror, but from something worse. Recognition. I knew what was on the other side. I'd seen it before. I'd buried it before. But the house, it never forgets. It reconstructs. I pushed the door open. It was my childhood bedroom. Again. But older now. As if the room had aged alongside me. The posters were faded, curled at the edges. The books on the shelves were the same, but the pages yellowed. The bed was made with the same checkered comforter, though moth-eaten and sagging in the middle. A box of toys in the corner sat open, collecting dust like a casket. And sitting on the edge of the bed was my father, dead 10 years, alive here. He looked up and smiled, That same smile I remembered from one of the few good days we had before things turned to silence and locked doors. "Hey, sport," he said. "Been a while." I couldn't move. "You're not real," I whispered. He tilted his head. "Real enough for now." The house had gotten bold. It didn't just want to haunt me. It wanted to seduce me. It had learned that fear was too temporary. Panic burns fast and fizzles out. But longing, nostalgia, regret, those last forever. Those are rooms people willingly go back to. "You can stay here," my father said, voice soft, steady. "No more running, no more doors, just peace. We can build it together, room by room. The version of your life you were always supposed to have." Behind him, the wall shimmered. It melted into a family room we never had. A fireplace flickered. A woman's laugh echoed from a kitchen that never existed. I heard a child, my child, running through halls that had never been built. All illusions. All blueprints waiting to be poured into concrete. I stepped back. The room pulsed. "You don't have to go back to the pain," he said. "You don't have to remember what it did to you, what it made you." "That's exactly why I have to leave," I replied. "Because that's what it wants, to erase the pain, so I forget how deep the house runs. It wants me to feel safe." The room trembled. His smile faded. "You don't get to leave this time," he said. His voice cracked, not with sorrow, but cracks in the mask. The edges of his skin split. The illusion fell. The room darkened. And behind my father, the wall bled. It peeled open to reveal another hallway. Longer. Endless. And carved into the ceiling, in lines too jagged to be made by human hands, were 4 words: EVRY MEMORIS Rome. I ran again, into the blood hall, into the next corridor. Each door along the way flung open as I passed, showing me lives I'd never lived. One where I became a priest. One where I never left the town. One where I died at 23 and was buried in a yard behind the Holloway house. Each door was a choice I hadn't made. Each door was a version the house had stored, and at the very end a mirror, huge, shattered, reflecting every version of me at once, some alive, some screaming, some smiling, because the house had taken from me long ago, and now it wanted to give something back. The final door stood open, waiting, and I knew what I would find on the other side. The first room, the very first, the original door I had opened as a child, curious, innocent, unknowing. The house wanted me to close it, to finish the loop, to seal the story, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped inside. And for the first time in all this horror, I lit a match. The room hissed, the wood curled, the air screamed. Because the house had planned for fear, it had prepared for sorrow, but it had never prepared for fire. And if memory was the house, then I would burn every room I had. Even if it meant burning myself with it. Flames are supposed to roar. They're supposed to crackle and howl, to devour wood with hunger and spit heat in every direction. But the fire I lit in that first room, the one I remembered but had never actually seen, did none of that. It didn't rage. It watched. The matchstick hissed to life, and instead of leaping outwards, the flame curved inward, folding back on itself like it was tasting the space it was in. The air didn't change. The temperature didn't rise. The walls didn't blacken or blister. They simply stared back. That was the first sign I hadn't started a fire in a house. I'd started one inside a thought. The match dropped from my hand. I expected the carpet to smolder. It didn't. The flame kissed the floor and disappeared. Not extinguished, not smothered, absorbed. Like the house had sipped it, tested its flavor. And then, after a beat, the floor pulsed. Not visibly. Just enough for me to feel it in my shoes, in my bones. I ran. Not from the fire, from the reaction. Because I realized too late, you don't light a match in a living thing and expect it to burn. You light a match in a living thing, and it defends itself. The hallway outside the first room was no longer there. In its place, a staircase. Endless. Spiraling down in tight, suffocating turns. The railing was slick with something warm. I didn't want to know what. I gripped it anyway, Each step I took downward, the air thickened, and behind me, I heard it, the fire. Thinking it made no sound, not at first, but slowly, softly, it began to hum. A low vibration that wasn't heard so much as inhaled, and with each breath I took, it filled me. Not smoke, not heat, intent. Like the house was trying to figure out why I had dared to light something inside it. What had I seen? What had I remembered? I reached the bottom of the stairs, lungs aching, legs shaking, and stepped into a chamber I didn't recognize. It was a void. No walls. No ceiling. Just a floor of endless black stone, stretching into nothing. Suspended in the middle of this impossible room was a heart. Massive. Beating. Not suspended by strings or wires. Just hanging in the air like gravity had forgotten about it. Each thud echoed through me. Not my heartbeat, the house's. For the first time, I wasn't inside it metaphorically. I was standing in the core of whatever it truly was. And the fire had followed me. It slithered along the edges of the stone, flickering without smoke or ash. Orange tendrils of light reached out like fingers, testing, curious. I expected them to attack the heart, but they didn't. They circled it. Then me, then fused. Not burned, fused. I fell to my knees. The heart pulsed harder, like it had been startled awake. Visions hit me. 1,000 doors, opening and closing all at once. 1,000,000 footsteps across floors that had never existed. Whispers in voices that no longer had throats. And beneath it all, a single, binding blueprint. Every person who had ever entered the house had left a mark. Not on the walls. In the walls. Like living tattoos burned into flesh. I saw the woman in the wedding dress again, her veil pulled over a mirror, whispering secrets to a reflection that changed each time she blinked. I saw the girl with the sewn, shut mouth, scratching words into floorboards with her nails. I saw the man with no eyes who counted the footsteps in the hallway because he believed if he got it right, he could leave. And I saw myself, all of them, every version. One sobbing, one laughing, one smiling in surrender, one walking backward into a burning room. But only one, me now, stood in the heart holding flame. The fire curled around my hands, still not burning. It wasn't here to destroy. It was here to remember. That's what the house hated most: clarity. It didn't feed on blood. It fed on confusion. On the unknown. On unfinished stories. I stood, the fire whispering inside my ribs now, pulsing in time with the heart in the air. Tell me, I whispered, what are you? The heart stopped, just one beat, one pause. And a voice, low, layered, not quite human, spoke from inside my skull, I am everything you never faced. And then the heart opened. It split down the center, slowly, like it had never been cut before. And inside, I saw it, the original room, not the one from my memory. The first room the house had ever built. Not physical, not architectural. A moment, a trauma. I remembered it now. Every twisted second. I was 5, and I had watched something I shouldn't have, a door I shouldn't have seen. Not in a house, in a hospital. My mother on a gurney. The light above her flickering, doctors whispering, the machines screaming, and me standing in the hallway, peeking through a door marked "Do Not Enter." That was it. That was where the house began. Not a building, a break. A moment where I stepped somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. And I never left. I had built the house from that crack forward. Every room, a memory. Every hallway, a way to avoid the truth. The house wasn't haunting me, I was haunting it. It wanted to be destroyed. But it needed to be understood first. The fire in my hands flared. For the first time it burned. The pain was cleansing, not cruel. It clarified. I stepped forward, into the heart, into the memory, into the beginning, and I burned it. Not to erase it, to face it. The house shrieked, not in agony, in relief, because after all these years, someone had finally walked all the way back to the first brick and lit it up. I woke in the street, rain falling, bus driving by, people normal, sky uncracked, and for once, no door, no hallway, no hum, just the sound of my own breathing. I touched my palm, a scar, a burn, a reminder. The house wasn't gone, but it was no longer in charge, because it had finished remembering. And now, I was the one writing the next room. Peace never arrives as silence. Not when you've lived inside the house. Not when its walls are made of your memories, and its doors open into every part of yourself you tried to forget. So when I woke up on that bench again, same rain-streaked glass, same flickering streetlight, I didn't sigh with relief. I didn't tell myself, it's over, no. I sat perfectly still and waited, listening not for footsteps or whispers or scratching behind the wall, but for something worse, familiarity. Because if the house had really let go of me, the world would feel new. But this felt like a loop closing back in. The burn on my palm was still there, a jagged spiral of scar tissue that pulsed faintly with heat when I stared too long. Not pain, memory. That scar wasn't a wound, it was a message. A seal. Something permanent carved into flesh to mark me as someone who had seen the heart of the house and survived. But I wasn't free, not yet. Because houses don't die when you burn them. They shift. They find new cracks, new entry points, new people to remember them. The house wasn't following me anymore. It was watching through me. I stood and walked down the street. Every shadow looked like it was waiting. The rain didn't fall. It hovered, mid-air, caught between 2 seconds that didn't agree on which way time should go. My breath misted, but only in one direction. That's how I knew the fabric was thinning again. The world was trying to hold together, but the house's memory was heavier than reality itself. You don't carry something like that without the weight bleeding through. At the corner of Magnolia and Pine, an intersection I'd never seen before and yet knew instinctively, I found a phone booth. Ancient, red, British, like something dragged from a movie set. It stood alone, its glass fogged from the inside. I approached slowly, heart beating a rhythm I didn't remember learning. The door creaked open without resistance. Inside, a phone sat off the hook, swinging gently. No dial tone, no operator. But the second I stepped inside, the world outside vanished. Not blinked away, evaporated. One moment streets, next void. The booth now floated in a black space lit by moving veins of red, as if blood were being pumped through a sky made of skin. I tried to move, but the booth held me fast. Not locked, just rooted. I was inside a lung, a heart, a memory turned inward. The phone buzzed once, and then it spoke. Not a ring, a voice. My voice. You burned the first room. I didn't answer. But that wasn't where it started. My chest tightened. I saw the beginning. No, it said. You saw yours. The house remembers more than you. A window appeared in front of me. Not part of the booth. Just floating. It shimmered and began to play images like film on a reel. An old woman standing in an attic, staring at a trunk. A child in the 1800s walking into a cellar that had no steps down. A soldier in a foreign country writing letters that never reached home because the mailbox he used only led inward. Dozens of lives. Each one caught in the echo. Each one trapped inside their own variation of the house. And in each of their eyes, that same look I'd seen in the mirror. Not terror. Recognition. Because they'd opened a door to. The house was not mine. It never had been. I was just one more vein in its body, one more seed. The phone buzzed again. You lit a match. Now others are starting to see. The fire, it had spread. Not in flame, but in awareness. Each scar I left behind, each step I retraced, each truth I uncovered, it had become contagious. And now the house was cracking. From the inside, the booth door blew open. I stumbled out and landed not on pavement, not on stone, but carpet. Red, familiar. I was back in the Hall of Versions. All those doors, all those mirrors. But now they were open, and people were stepping out of them. Dozens, hundreds, men and women, children, old souls and new ones. Each bearing their own wounds. Some cried, some smiled. All walked forward, toward me. And behind them, the house quaked. Its shape unraveling. Rooms collapsing. Because its secret had been shared. It couldn't manipulate what was understood. It couldn't control what was known. The crowd circled me. One woman stepped forward. She had a scar just like mine. On the same hand, she held it up, and without speaking, we pressed our palms together. The fire passed between us. Warm, brilliant, a flame that didn't burn but revealed. And I saw, through her eyes, through all their eyes, the house hadn't been a place. It had been a system. A construct born of unresolved pain, passed from mind to mind like a virus of forgetting. Each person who entered left a piece behind. And now, with so many returning, so many remembering, it couldn't hold its form anymore. The walls sagged, the ceiling split, not violently, but peacefully, like a dream finally ready to wake up. A voice echoed across the crumbling space, layered, impossible, familiar. Not angry, not afraid, just tired. Thank you. I looked around, trying to find the source, but there was nothing, only the house. Letting go, room by room, the lights blinked out, the doors shut, the windows sealed, and the house finally forgot itself. It didn't explode, it didn't vanish, it just stopped. And we, those who survived, stood in the dark, free, but not unmarked. The woman beside me said, "Will it come back?" I nodded. Yes, somewhere, in someone, but not in us. I looked at the scar on my hand, felt the fire still glowing under my skin. No, I said, not in us. We carry the light now, and for the first time since this began, I smile. Not because it was over, but because now, when the house whispers again, when it finds a new crack, a new door, a new mind, we'll be waiting. There's a silence that comes after survival, but it's never quiet. It's the kind of silence that breathes behind your ear, walks half a step behind you, and hums a song you almost recognize. I carried it with me after the house ended, not as a burden, but as residue, as warning. The scar on my hand didn't fade. The people I met in that final collapse, the ones who walked out of the mirrors and down those impossible hallways, they all vanished like mist in sunlight. No goodbyes, no promises, just a sudden, collective understanding we were free, but not untouched. And the fire inside us, that was never going out. I moved back into the world. Real streets, real time, work, errands, conversations with strangers who didn't look past their own skin. I even started sleeping through the night, at first. For a while, I believed that was it, the end, like the closing of a chapter. The camera pans away, the music swells, and somewhere deep in the woods, the house decays into memory. But memory doesn't die when you stop thinking about it. It hides. It waits. 2 weeks after my return, I woke to find my bedroom window open. I live on the 5th floor. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I just walked to the window, looked out into the dark, and listened. Nothing. Not at first. But as I turned to shut it, I heard it. A whisper. One word, so soft it barely existed. Please. Not a command. Not a trick. A plea. The fire in my scar pulsed once. A warning. I shut the window, locked it, and told myself it was nothing. But I knew better. That whisper wasn't from the house. Not exactly. It was from someone inside it. Someone who hadn't made it out. Someone left behind. I tried to forget again. To bury it. Pretend that the collapse I saw was total, absolute. But I began to dream. The same dream. Every night. A hallway of doors stretching into the dark. All locked. Except one. The one I refused to open. Because I knew what waited behind it. Not a monster. Not a ghost. A child. The boy. Not twisted, not mocking, just sitting, knees tucked to chest, head down. Waiting. Because he never left. He was never meant to. He was the root. The seed. The thing the house was built around. And I had walked away without him. The fire inside me was growing. Not wild, not uncontrolled. Directed. It wanted to go back. Not to explore. To rescue. That was the problem with memory. You can't leave part of yourself behind and expect it to stay quiet. That child wasn't a trick. He was me. The version I buried so deep even the house didn't see him at first. And now he was calling. Not as a trap, but as a final piece. I ignored it for 3 nights. Then 4. On the 5th, I saw the door. Not in a dream. Not in a hallway. in the middle of my apartment, right where my dining table used to be. A single, white wooden door, no frame, no knob, just waiting, silent, still. I stood in front of it for what felt like hours. The fire in my hand hummed. Not fear, not pain, just readiness. It was like I'd been preparing for this since the first scream I ever ignored. The house wasn't coming back for vengeance. It was asking for completion. I stepped through, and I didn't fall into chaos. No spiraling stairs, no flickering lights, just a room. Circular. Walls covered in crayon drawings. All of them mine. From when I was a child. They moved slightly, like they were drawn on skin. And in the center, the boy sat. Not facing me, not hiding, just waiting. When I stepped forward, he didn't flinch. When I spoke, he didn't respond. But when I knelt down beside him, when I reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder, he finally looked up. His eyes were mine. Before the house, before the fear, before everything. "Why did you leave me?" he asked. I had no answer. I was supposed to be the survivor, the one who burned the house, but he was the one who had waded through all of it. Alone, I pulled him close, held him, not as a hero, but as someone who had failed him. Over and over. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I thought you were just a trick." He didn't speak, but he didn't pull away. The fire between us flared, bright golden, not destruction, healing. The room began to fold. The walls collapsed inward, not violently, but like paper in water. And for the first time in this entire story, there was peace. I stood with the boy. He took my hand. We stepped forward. Together, no door, no transition, just light. And on the other side, I woke in my bed, sunlight streaming through the window. No whisper, no scar. The table was back where it belonged. And in the mirror, I looked the same. Except now, there was no shadow behind me. No flicker of something waiting. The boy was no longer inside, because he didn't need to be hidden. We were whole. The house would always exist in some way, somewhere, waiting in trauma, in pain, in forgotten memory. But now, it had one less version to feed on. And as I stepped outside, into a day that didn't feel like it had been scripted, I heard something I hadn't heard in years. My own laughter. Soft. Surprised. Free. Freedom. It turned out wasn't loud. It didn't arrive like thunder or sweep in with music. It was small, thin, and oddly quiet. I kept waiting for something to pull it away from me. Waiting for the wind to shift, the light to flicker, for the smell of ash to rise again from the edges of my life. But it didn't. At least not at first. The boy inside me was whole. The house was gone. I woke up, ate breakfast, went to work, and for a brief, beautiful stretch of time, I lived a life that didn't feel borrowed or haunted. But freedom has its own kind of danger, because peace breeds doubt. And doubt lets shadows sneak in without knocking. It started with the clock. I kept one on the wall in my living room. Cheap, plastic, unremarkable. But one afternoon I noticed it had stopped ticking. Not just slowed, stopped. Exactly at 3:33 p.m., I replaced the batteries. It ticked for a few seconds and then stopped again. Same time. I threw it away. Bought a new one. That, too, froze at 3:33. Then the birds vanished. Not literally. They were still there. But the ones outside my window stopped singing. It was like they saw something I couldn't. Like they were waiting for a cue I hadn't heard. The quiet became unbearable. Not oppressive. Not screaming like the house had once been. Just intentional. Everything felt like it was pausing for something. I started seeing my own reflection move slightly after I did, not in obvious ways. Just a flicker. A breath. A blink delayed by a split second. I convinced myself I was tired. That trauma echoes even when you think it's healed. That I was still adjusting to normalcy, but the fire in my palm, where the scar had vanished, started to itch. Not pain, not heat, a signal. Something was nearby, and then one night, I heard the knock. 3 short taps. I was brushing my teeth. The sound came from behind the bathroom mirror, not from the wall behind it, from the mirror itself. I stood frozen, foaming toothpaste dripping from my mouth, listening. Nothing followed. No voice. No whisper. Just the knock. I didn't open the cabinet. I stared, and behind the glass, for just a moment, I saw the boy again. But not as he had been. His face was covered in ash. Eyes hollowed out, mouth sewn shut. Not physically, but spiritually. Something had tried to bury him again. Something had reached back into me to pull him away. The fire surged. I gripped the sink and said nothing. Because this wasn't the house returning. It was something worse. Something that had survived the fire. The echo. The memory of the house, not as structure, not as place, but as pattern. I saw it the next morning. Someone across the street watching me. Standing too still. Wearing a smile that didn't belong. Eyes too wide. Clothes outdated. Like they'd stepped from a decade that hadn't happened yet. They held a book in one hand. A small, leather-bound journal. It looked exactly like the one I had torn apart in the house. I blinked. They were gone. I began seeing more of them. On trains. In alleys. On rooftops. Always watching. Never moving. People who didn't belong but had found their way into this world through memory. I remembered what the phone booth voice said. You burned the first room. But that wasn't where it started. I was naive to believe I had reached the origin. The house wasn't a single memory. It was a network. Each person who'd ever stepped through a door, whether in dream, trauma, or sleepwalking madness, had opened a path. Some had made it out. Others had become echoes. And those echoes, they weren't passive. They were rebuilding. Somewhere, not physically, but through us, through our stories, our nightmares, our guilt. I received a letter 2 days later. No return address. Inside a photograph, it showed a door. Red. Wooden. Carved with symbols I didn't recognize. And scrawled in pen across the back, "This one remembers you." I dropped it. Burned it. But the fire didn't catch. The photograph wouldn't burn. Because memory can't be destroyed. Only changed. And suddenly, I realized I had left the house. But part of me had become it. That's why I still heard things. That's why reflections still twitched when I wasn't looking. Because the boy, the house, the fire, all of it had stitched itself into me. Not to haunt me, to rebuild through me. The people watching weren't monsters, they were versions. Trapped in their own cycles. Trying to escape. But without fire, without memory, without someone like me, they couldn't find their way out. And now they were circling. Waiting. Hoping I'd open a door again. Let the pattern begin anew. But I wouldn't. Not this time. Instead, I would find them first, not to fight, but to remember them. To show them the flame. Because the only way to end the house forever isn't to escape it. It's to walk into every version, every echo, and bring the light. One door at a time. I thought I was done with doors. Thought the fire had sealed the last of them. That the walls I had once wandered were nothing more than soot in a forgotten place. But then the watchers began to follow me, not just as shapes in the distance, but as presences pressing into my life. They didn't hide anymore. One sat beside me on the train. Another passed me a note in a grocery store. The note didn't say anything, not in words. It just had a drawing my face, perfectly sketched, with the word REAT-URN carved into my forehead like a brand. These weren't echoes lost in their own loops. These were memory hunters, and they had figured out what I was. They weren't here to haunt. They were here to extract. It happened one night while I slept. I had finally drifted off after days of tension, my body heavy, my mind blank, a dreamless blackness swallowing me whole, and then I felt a cold hand press against my chest. Not outside, but from within. Like someone had reached through my own ribs. I sat up gasping. My apartment was pitch dark. Not night, dark, starless. The kind of dark you feel under your fingernails. I turned toward the window. One of them was there. Not standing. Floating, head tilted. Book in one hand. The other hand pressed against the glass. No breath, no motion. Just watching. I shouted. No sound came out. The lights refused to turn on. And then the watcher moved. Not into the apartment, but into me. It didn't break the glass. It stepped through it. Like my world had no substance anymore. Like it had decided to stop pretending reality existed at all. It stared into my face, so close I could smell its breathless presence. Old paper, burnt wood, and time. And then it whispered one word. Archive. That's what they were doing. That's what they had always been doing. Not haunting. Archiving. Preserving every version of the house they could find. Every person who survived it. Every scar, every memory, every piece of fire they hadn't earned. These weren't just echoes. They were librarians. And I was a walking book they hadn't cataloged yet. I fought back. Not with fists, with remembrance. I closed my eyes and pulled the fire up from the pit of me, not the kind that burns, but the kind that shows. The truth. The first moment. The real room. The pain that started everything. The image of a boy watching a door close and locking his scream inside. I held it in front of the watcher like a mirror, and it screamed. Not in rage, in fear. It wasn't supposed to see its own origin. That's the risk of archiving everything. You're forced to confront the source. The watcher collapsed into ash and vanished. But I knew that wasn't the end, not even close. They would send more. Because I had something they needed. A mind that remembered the way out. A heart that had survived the collapse. And a flame that had never gone out. I couldn't wait anymore. I had to hunt them. I gathered my journals, each one filled with scrawled details from the house, from the versions, from the spaces between. Dates. Names. Symbols I had drawn while half asleep, hands moving on their own. There were patterns I hadn't seen before. Shapes that formed paths. Places in the city where time warped just slightly. I began to map them. The laundromat where no dryer spun in the same direction twice. The alley that smelled like dust even in the rain. The bookstore where the fiction section changed order when you blinked. They were entry points, small breaches, not enough to drag a person in, but enough to let watchers step out. And they were growing. One night, I followed one of them. Not close, never close. They don't walk, they glide, like smoke wearing skin. It moved through people like fog, unnoticed, unloved, untouched. I watched it slip into a building I thought was condemned. Broken windows, boarded door, a rusted chain holding the gate shut. But the second the watcher passed through, the door opened. Without sound, without effort, I followed. Inside, the world bent. Gravity pulsed. Colors twisted in ways no light should allow. And behind the front lobby, a room filled with boxes, thousands, each labeled with a name. Some I recognized, some I felt. Each box was a person who had walked through a door and never come back. This was their archive, not a library, a graveyard. Every box pulsed faintly, not dead, sleeping, waiting for a voice to wake them, a voice like mine. The watcher moved to a box in the far corner. It opened it, pulled out something that looked like a photograph, but shimmered like water. It was a version of me, a moment I never lived, me walking away from the house, smiling, married, holding a child, a life I almost had. The watcher tried to insert it into another box, to crossbreed memories, like it was building something new. A stronger version of the house, one that wasn't just built from fear, but from hope. That's when I understood the true horror. They weren't trying to trap people anymore. They were trying to perfect the house, make it desirable, unavoidable, something you'd walk into willingly. That would feel like home. Because no one questions the door that offers peace. No one resists the version of life they wish had happened. I attacked the watcher. Fire in both hands now, memory pulsing through my fingers. I didn't burn it. I remembered it. I forced it to see every version of itself, every moment it stole, every child it twisted, every scream it filed away, and it shattered. Ash again. Gone. But the boxes remained, unopened. Sleeping. I backed out of the building, sealed the door, and for the first time in weeks, I was scared again. Not because the house had returned, but because it never left. It just changed strategy. Now it waits in your happiest memory. Now it builds doors with laughter. Now it whispers not with fear, but with promises. And the memory hunters, they're still out there, building, rewriting, smiling. And I'm the only one who remembers what they are. There's something sickening about knowing you're being studied. Not chased, not hunted, studied. Watched like a specimen in a tank, not out of curiosity, but strategy. The watchers had stopped pretending. They no longer appeared as people. They no longer wore polite masks or feigned humanity. They had shed the last fragments of illusion. And now they looked exactly like what they were. Unfinished humans, built from stolen memories, wearing the expressions of forgotten lives. You could see the seams. Smiles too wide, eyelids that blinked out of sync, fingers that bent the wrong way when they waved. They weren't mimicking anymore. They were designing. Each one of them carried a piece of the new house. Not a room, not a hallway, a blueprint. And it wasn't just made from pain now. It was being engineered out of desire, hope, nostalgia. Everything beautiful that people would crawl toward without question. It was no longer a prison. It was a promise. I saw it unfold firsthand. A new door appeared in the subway station under 12th and Rains. It wasn't part of the wall. It wasn't hiding in shadows. It stood proudly on the platform, red and gold, glowing faintly like it belonged there. Nobody questioned it. Nobody stopped. People walked past it as if they'd seen it 100 times. A man in a wrinkled suit opened it with a sigh, like he was heading home. I tried to stop him. I reached for his arm. He turned and smiled. "It's where I left them," he said. "I remember now." He stepped inside. The door vanished, not closed. Gone, like it had never existed. That's when I understood these weren't doors anymore. They were answers. Each one tailored. Each one crafted from the memories you wanted most, but could never get back. The house wasn't trying to trap me again. It was trying to recruit me, and I was almost impressed. Almost. Because I knew what lay on the other side of that beauty. I had walked those hallways. I had seen what the truth looked like beneath the wallpaper. The foundation wasn't built on hope. It fed on it. I returned to the archive building, the one with the boxes of lives sealed inside. It had changed. The outside was sleek, now modern. Glass panels, clean lines. It looked like a corporate headquarters. Even had a name etched in gold across the front, Momo Riksha. A brand. A business. I walked through the front doors like I belonged there. No one stopped me. No one asked questions. Inside, people sat at desks typing. Quiet. Too quiet. Their faces were still. Expressions pinned like butterflies in glass cases. And when I passed them, their eyes didn't follow me. But I felt them watching anyway. At the end of the corridor, a receptionist stood behind a marble counter. She smiled. The smile was real. Painfully, atchingly real. It hurt to look at. Like seeing a loved one the moment before they disappear. "Welcome back," she said. "I've never been here," I replied. She tilted her head, still smiling. "You helped build this place." And I realized she wasn't lying. Every door I'd opened, every version I'd burned, every step I took away from the original house, they were instructions. Not for escape, for evolution. I had mapped out the flaws, the cracks, the escape routes, and they had used that map to patch the gaps, to rebuild something cleaner, smoother, more convincing. A house that didn't collapse, a house that cooperated. "You're here for integration," the receptionist said. "Your design is nearly complete." "What design?" I asked. She stepped aside. Behind her, a hallway stretched into a room filled with floating blueprints, holograms made of memory. And in the center, me. Not just a drawing. A full 3D model of my brain, my thoughts, my fears. Projected, labeled, dissected. My trauma wasn't being studied. It was being replicated. Room by room, mapped and adapted, so they could sell it. They weren't building a haunted house anymore. They were selling curated experiences. You could walk through a tragedy, heal your pain in real time, relive the best day of your life until your soul dissolved into it. They were turning the house into a product. And I was the blueprint. "You can stop resisting," the receptionist said. "You've already been downloaded." I turned to leave, but the fire in my chest, old and stubborn, lit again. They'd taken my pain, my fear, but they hadn't taken my rage. I walked into the blueprint room. Every projection flickered as I passed. The walls began to bend, not crumble. React. I was no longer a subject. I was a virus inside their system. I reached the model of my brain, touched it. The fire spread into it. It didn't burn. It rewrote. The rooms twisted. The memories shifted. Suddenly the walls weren't sleek anymore. They began to peel, bleed. The illusion cracked. One of the watchers burst through a side door, snarling, skin half finished. I faced it without fear, because this wasn't their house. It was mine, built from me. And if they were using my mind to create their perfect version, then I would be the flaw they could never fix. The watcher lunged. I grabbed its throat and whispered the name of the first room. The real name. The one the house never wanted remembered. The one it buried to keep control. The watcher exploded into salt and ash. The building groaned. The blueprints burned from the inside. People began to wake at their desks, screaming, pulling wires from their heads, realizing they'd been plugged into a dream they didn't agree to. I turned once more to the receptionist. She didn't smile now, just said, "You've doomed them." "No," I replied. "I've reminded them." As I walked out, the building collapsed behind me, not into rubble, into nothing, unwritten, erased. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was another beginning, because you can destroy a building. But a blueprint, that survives in whispers, in minds, in pain. And someone somewhere was already drawing the next door. I stopped looking for the signs after Memorica fell. Thought I could step away, live a life without ghosts dragging fingerprints across my skin. But that's the problem with being the original blueprint. The story doesn't let you go. It follows, silent and slow, rewiring everything it touches. Days went normal again, almost. I drank coffee that didn't scream, woke up in a bed that stayed solid. My reflection finally moved in time with me, but it was all surface. A calm drawn too tight, because something deeper had started pulling, like a rope in my gut, tugged gently by unseen hands. It began with the sketches, not mine. Someone else had been drawing again. On the walls of my stairwell, behind dumpsters, in the dust on car windows. Always the same shape, a door, rounded at the top, no knob, a faint circle carved at its center. Not threatening, not loud, just familiar, too familiar. It wasn't one of the watchers. It wasn't even the house. This was different, newborn. I ignored the first dozen, the next 20. But on the 38th door, I saw something that made my legs buckle. My name. Written in looping childlike letters beneath it. Not just my first name, my full name. No one should have known that. Not out here. Not anymore. Not unless they were inside me. I spent hours tearing the wall down, convinced it was some illusion. But it was just brick and plaster. Nothing special. Nothing behind it. But the drawing stayed even when the wall was crumbling. I stopped sleeping after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt pressure on my chest, like something was climbing out of me. One night I woke up on the floor with a crayon in my hand. Red, fresh dust under my nails. The wall opposite my bed now bore the door. Perfect. Centered. I checked the security footage from my building. My camera had shorted out at 3:33 a.m. Again. The exact moment every clock used to stop. Whatever this was, it hadn't come from outside. It had grown from me. I tried to erase the sketch. It bled through every coat of paint. I knocked. Nothing, I screamed. Still silence. But that night, I dreamed of it opening. And what I saw wasn't a room. It was a mirror, not showing my reflection. Showing every version of me that had ever touched the house. They weren't trapped. They weren't dead. They were waiting. One of them stepped forward. Not the boy, an adult, worn, pale. Scar on the opposite hand. He leaned close to the mirror and whispered, "You stopped the house." But you didn't stop the intention. I woke up to a phone ringing. I don't own a landline. I found the receiver on the kitchen floor, the cord snaking into nothing. A voice on the other end whispered one word: prototype. The word hit like a cold nail. I remembered the archive, the blueprints, the watchers trying to craft a perfected version. This wasn't their second attempt. It was mine. Somewhere, deep in my mind, or deeper in reality itself, I had unintentionally created a fallback, a seed. The moment I burned the original house, a piece of it had copied itself into my subconscious. Because fire doesn't destroy memory. It just reshapes it. This wasn't the old house coming back. It was my version finally waking up, designed in my image, built on my patterns. A place that only I could open. Or now it wanted in. Or maybe it wanted out. I tried to leave the city. I got halfway to the edge before the road circled me back to my apartment. I tried to burn the door. The wall hissed. The fire vanished. I tried to forget it. But every time I blinked, I saw the noblest curve etched behind my eyes. I even tried cutting the memory out, scratched the drawing into paper, tore it, set it on fire. But the next morning it was back, on my skin, drawn onto my forearm in red ink. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the architect. But that's what made this so much worse. Because I knew exactly how deep it could go. How far the walls could stretch. I had built this version not to hurt, not to trap, but to offer relief. It was shaped like comfort, textured like forgiveness. It would feel like closure, even as it hollowed you out. A perfect simulation of healing. And no one would ever resist it. Because why would you turn away from a door that offers to take your pain? Even I wanted to open it. I stared at that red arch and saw everything I'd ever lost waiting behind it. A second chance with my mother. The sound of my father's voice not slurred by grief. The version of me who never walked into the hospital that night. The version who never built the house. But every inch of my body remembered what came next. Peace wasn't the trap, it was the sedative. And the house that felt like home. It didn't let you leave. Ever. Not because it locked the door, but because you wouldn't want to. I stood in front of the wall and whispered, "I know what you are." No response. So I placed my palm on it. The wall was cold, then warm, then beating. The same pulse as the heart I saw in the original house, but fainter. Like this version hadn't fully come alive yet. It needed activation, and I had been feeding it from the start. Every memory, every version, every word. So I did the only thing I could. I sat down, and I began to write backwards. Every memory I had of the house, I rewrote it, unmade it, not to erase what happened, but to remove its center. I reshaped the origin, changed the door's color, moved the first trauma. I disconnected the pattern, and for a moment, I felt the door waver. Its outline shimmered, the hum in the walls died, but then a knock, soft, 3 taps. I looked up, and there it was again, the drawing, fresh, brighter, still red, still mine, and underneath it, a message now scratched in my own handwriting: "We've already opened it." The prototype wasn't waiting for me to activate it. It had been activated by someone else. Someone who remembered my memory, who dreamed the same version, another survivor, another fire bearer, another blueprint, and suddenly I knew this wasn't just my door anymore. It was spreading. Version by version, person by person, a new house born of relief built in the skin of hope. And I had to find the one who opened it first, before it learns to build a world we never want to leave. The hardest prisons aren't built with bars or stone. They're built from comfort, from warm lights and quiet laughter, from smells you haven't known in years. Fresh bread, your mother's perfume, the old pine of a school hallway. That's what the new house offered. That's what the prototype perfected. It was no longer a nightmare. It was a dream with walls. And someone, somewhere had stepped into it first. Not a victim, a believer. Someone who wanted what it offered. That's all it takes, isn't it? One person to walk through willingly and never come back. One soul to say, yes, I'd rather have peace than truth. And the second that happened, the door I drew wasn't a warning anymore. It became a gateway. I didn't know who they were. Man, woman, child, it didn't matter. But they had to be like me. Had to have walked through the same burning hallways. Had to carry their own scar that pulsed beneath the surface like a ticking clock. I began searching. Not online. Not in news. In places that shouldn't exist. I knew the signs by now. A shadow with a memory too bright. A stairwell that changed depth when no one was looking. An elevator that always stopped at a floor marked, even though there was no button for it. The city had been infiltrated, not by doors, but by dreams in waiting. I found the first breach in a cafe that no longer served food. It was all glass and dead plants, a menu that hadn't changed in 10 years. But everyone inside was smiling, too long, too still. They laughed like it was choreographed. They blinked in unison. And on the wall, just above the counter, hung a painting of a door. Not drawn, painted with blood. My blood. I could feel it. The room tasted like metal. I reached for it. Instinct, not logic. And the moment my finger touched the frame, the world rippled. I was standing in a living room. Not mine. Not anyone's I knew. But it felt like home. Soft couch. Light jazz. A fire flickering just beyond the hearth. Photos on the walls of people I half remembered from dreams. I knew what this was. I knew it wasn't real, but it was built from real pieces. It knew how to replicate me. The house hadn't needed to drag me in this time. I had stepped willingly, even for a second, and that was enough. The prototype had my scent now. I walked through the room slowly. No creaks, no shadows, no whispers behind the walls. This version of the house didn't threaten you. It healed you, at least on the surface. Then I saw them, the believer. A girl, maybe 20, curled on the couch, eyes closed, smiling. I recognized her face, though I'd never met her. She'd been in one of the drawings I found weeks ago, the one scratched onto the subway wall. In that version, she was younger, crying, standing before a blackened door with her hands clenched into fists. This version, she looked free, content. But it was wrong. The kind of stillness only found in statues. I leaned in. She whispered without opening her mouth. I asked for this. It chilled me. Not because of what she said, but because it was the same voice I heard on the phone that night. Archive. She was the believer, the one who activated the prototype. But she hadn't meant to. She had wished. That was all it took. A moment of desperate wishing in the wrong place. At the wrong time, with all the wrong memories heavy on your back, and the house heard her. Not the old house, this new one, my design, my pattern, my failure. I tried to pull her from the couch. Her skin burned, not with heat, with want. She didn't resist, she didn't even move. Her breath was steady, her pulse slowed. And then she spoke again. This time, with her eyes still shut, you shouldn't be here. You'll break it. Break what? I stepped back, looked around. The living room had changed. The light was colder. The photo frames now hung empty. The fire in the hearth had gone still, frozen mid-flicker like wax caught between states. I hadn't done anything. I'd simply not belong. This house had been designed for her memories, her trauma, her relief. And now that an outsider had entered, it was compensating. The floor opened, quietly, without drama. A staircase revealed itself beneath the rug, leading down, always down. I didn't want to go, but I did, because the house wanted me to see what it was becoming. The walls were smooth as skin, pulsing softly. They didn't whisper. They breathed. I reached the bottom and found a long hallway, each door marked with a date, moments, choices, missed chances, and at the far end, a mirror, no glass, just memory. I looked in and saw myself smiling in ways I never had. Married, safe love. A version of me who never walked through the hospital that night. A version who never had to burn anything. And then that reflection looked directly at me and said, "You can stay." No fire, no watchers, just this. The girl appeared beside me in the reflection, still smiling, but now her eyes were hollowed. Not evil, not ghostly, just empty. Used up, the dream had drained her. Fed on her contentment until there was nothing left to dream with. That was the final design. The prototype didn't trap you in fear. It used you up in peace. Until your mind dissolved. Until your truth eroded into comfort. I stepped back. The mirror shattered. The hallway collapsed. And the house, the prototype, rejected me. I woke up on the cafe floor, blood in my mouth, ash on my palms. The girl was gone. Or maybe she'd never been there at all. But the painting on the wall, it had changed. Now it showed my apartment. And underneath it, in the same childlike scrawl, another version complete. I stumbled outside, breathing too hard. I realized something vital. The prototype wasn't just a new version of the house. It was an infection, spreading through dreams, through paintings, through memory itself. And I wasn't the only one carrying it. The believers were growing, each one building their own version, each one whispering the same phrase when they thought no one was listening. I asked for this, not as guilt, as gratitude. The dream was working, and I was running out of time. You never realize how fragile reality is until you start seeing the edits. Not mistakes, edits. Little erasures in the seams of your life. A missing street sign where one had always been. A store that used to play jazz now humming a tune you've never heard. A friend who suddenly remembers your name differently. They seem small at first, like dust on your memory. You blink them away, you move on. But they add up. Enough tiny changes, and suddenly you're not standing in the life you lived. You're trapped in a version someone else remembers for you. That's what the prototype was doing now. Not chasing. Not screaming. It was rewriting. Quietly. Patiently. I noticed the first big shift at my mailbox. My nameplate was gone. Not scratched off. Never there. My neighbors called me the new guy, even though I'd lived there for 3 years. When I tried to argue, their eyes glazed over, like they were buffering a memory that had been deleted. At work, my desk was missing. I found it, eventually. Moved 3 floors up, new nameplate. Different team, different role, and no one questioned it, not even me, for a second. Because the longer you live inside someone else's dream, the more you begin to doubt your own. I kept a journal. The only way to track what was real anymore. And even that began turning on me. Pages I didn't remember writing showed up between entries. Entries that detailed things I never lived. Conversations with people I'd never met. One entry simply read, "Stop resisting. It's safer here." Written in my handwriting. I didn't write it. I checked the ink. Still wet. Still warm. Whatever had taken hold of the prototype wasn't just infecting places or people. It was slipping into memory itself, rewriting you from the inside out, not to erase you, to make you stay. I started noticing them more frequently again. The believers. You could tell them apart easily, not by their eyes, not by how they walked, but by their peace. They never fidgeted, never got angry in traffic, never checked their phones with panic or laughed too loudly. They were perfectly at ease, like their pain had been filed away. Like their thoughts had been sorted, color-coded, and laminated. It was unnatural. One sat next to me on a park bench and handed me a folded piece of paper without a word. I waited until they left to open it. Just a single line: "You designed the room. We only filled it." That was it. But something about that phrasing sent ice through my blood, because I remembered, not consciously, not fully, but something. Back in the early stages of my escape, before I burned the original house, I had made a choice. I had buried one specific trauma deep in the architecture of the first version. Too deep to face. A room I never opened. A door I never mapped. But apparently they found it, and they built it into the prototype. That's why it was stable. That's why it worked. Because it was no longer a haunted house. It was a palace of forgetting. Each believer got their own room inside, a place to lock away the memory that hurt most. And once it was locked, the dream did the rest. The piece wasn't fake. It was engineered. I had to see the room again. My room, the one I buried. I waited until 3:33 a.m., when time folds easiest. Lit the scar on my palm with the old fire. It answered immediately. A tear opened in the wall of my bedroom, silent. Not red, not black, pale, like bone. I stepped through, and found myself standing in the first real memory I ever avoided. My childhood bedroom. Walls painted with half-peeled glow, in the dark stars. The bed that creaked like it was breathing. The closet door slightly ajar, and I knew what was behind it. Because it wasn't just fear I locked away back then. It was the first version of me that broke. The one who watched someone walk out the front door and never come back. The one who sat up at night trying to rearrange time in his head like puzzle pieces. I walked to the closet and opened it. No monsters, no ghosts. Just me, younger, staring at the ground, mouthing the same sentence on repeat. If I forget it, it didn't happen. That was the spell, the lie, the foundation of the new house. Forget it, and it becomes a dream. I knelt beside the boy, reached out to touch him. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, but he faded slowly, ash drifting upward, like his time was up, like I had finally remembered too much. And then the walls began to shift. The house didn't want me in that room. It had held that secret too long. To rip it out now would risk collapsing everything. I stood, flames rising behind my eyes, because now I knew how they built the dream, and I knew what I had to do. Expose it. The peace it gave wasn't healing, it was sedation. Every believer that walked through a door wasn't cured. They were edited, their grief locked in a beautiful box and placed on a shelf, but the pain wasn't gone. It just fed the house, one dream at a time. One life rewritten at a time. I stepped back through the tear into my apartment, marked the wall with a single red line, and wrote beneath it not a door, a lock, because that's what it was, and every believer out there, they were keys. They opened the house wider with every forgotten truth, and the more they loved the peace, the faster the house grew. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't soothe. It doesn't mean rest or peace or sleep. It means absence. A silence so full of weight it presses into your eardrums, like you're underwater. Like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to shatter. That was the silence I woke to the next morning. No city hum. No dogs. No passing cars. Even my fridge had stopped humming. I thought it was a power outage, but the lights worked. My phone still glowed. But outside my window, everything was still. Trees frozen mid-sway. Birds suspended in the air like someone had hit pause. The prototype had decided to get bold. It had taken sound. It had taken time. I opened my apartment door and saw the hallway stretched, far longer than it should have. Doors lined the walls like teeth, each one cracked just enough for shadows to spill out. Every few steps, I saw someone standing, unmoving. Believers, dozens of them, staring into the dark, whispering words I couldn't hear. Their lips moved, but the silence held. Not even breath. And the strangest part, they were smiling. Not in fear, not in awe, in contentment. The silence was giving them peace. That's what the new version had learned. You don't control people with fear anymore. That was the old house's trick. It had evolved. The prototype didn't want to scare you. It wanted you complacent. Still, soft, willing. And it had found a new weapon. Forget the sound. Forget the scream. I moved down the hall and into the stairwell. It spiraled far longer than it ever had. I counted 80, 7 steps to the next floor when there should have been 10. That's when I heard the first sound in hours. My own voice. But not echoing, it came from behind me. I turned and saw a door where the stairwell wall had been. Not red this time, not pale, clear, glass, and behind it me, another version, tied to a chair, smiling, mouth wide, eyes empty, head tilted like a puppet yanked at the neck. This version looked directly at me and mouthed, finally. Then he opened his mouth and sound rushed out. A scream that shattered the stairwell walls. Not pain, not anger, pure, ripping joy. The scream was wrong. It felt too real. Like the sound of a truth I'd buried so deep it had grown claws. I stumbled backward. The stairwell twisted and collapsed into itself like it had been paper the whole time. I fell. Not down. Sideways. Into the glass room. Everything stopped again. I was facing myself. He untied his own wrists, stood up, and walked in a circle around me. He didn't speak, but every step spoke. Each footfall a memory I'd tried to forget. He was built from my choices, the ones I didn't make, and now he had grown into his own presence. The house had done more than design peace. It had manufactured alternatives. It had taken everyone who ever stepped inside and created copies, simulations. Rooms filled with the versions of you that let go. I wasn't talking to a hallucination. I was confronting a life that chose silence, chose stillness, chose to stay. He finally spoke. "You were the first voice," he said, "so they needed your silence the most." The words hit like nails behind my teeth, because that's what they wanted now. Not to stop me, not to kill me, to quiet me, because I was still talking, still warning, still remembering. And the house couldn't grow if people kept remembering the truth. It needed me to go quiet. To stop telling the story, I backed away. But the room followed. It wasn't spatial anymore. It was narrative. Every time I tried to step out, another chapter formed. A classroom where no one spoke. A funeral where the casket laughed silently. A dinner table where everyone nodded politely at a meal made of paper. Each room built to replace a memory. Not erase it, not bury it. Overwrite it. And then came the final room, the hospital. The one I'd avoided. My greatest silence. I never spoke about what happened there. Not to anyone. Because it wasn't horror. It was failure. A person I couldn't save. Someone who needed me to speak up, and I stayed silent. The prototype knew that. It wasn't just building peace anymore. It was weaponizing guilt. The room flickered. Hospitals are always cold, but this one was too clean, too white. Everything gleamed with that uncanny perfection that only exists in memory, never in life. The bed was empty, but the voice came from the walls. A whisper that sounded like every loved one I'd ever let down. This could have been home, and I said nothing. Because I was tired. Tired of fighting rooms. Tired of rewriting history. Tired of seeing my own failures replayed as perfect loops. That's when I felt it. The fire. The real one. The imperfect one. The flame that came not from peace or comfort or truth, but from mess, from pain, from trying, from breaking and standing anyway. I raised my hand and whispered a name, not mine. Theirs. The one I lost. And the flame lit, not in destruction, in honor. The room began to peel, not in rage, in release. The silence cracked, and I spoke. 3 words, "I remember you," and the dream collapsed. The prototype lost grip on the thread, because it could erase sound. It could edit memory. It could overwrite pain with comfort. But it couldn't survive honesty. Not the kind that costs you something. Not the kind that hurts to say. I woke up gasping, back in my apartment, and I heard sound again, a bird, a siren. My own heartbeat, the wall was blank. No drawing, no door. But I knew better. It wasn't gone. It had just been pushed back. Because every believer still carried it. Every silent smile. Every perfect dream. The house hadn't failed. It had simply missed me. And now, it would try again. It started with a twitch. A flicker in the corner of my vision. I was in line at a coffee shop. Real people, real sounds, nothing wrong. But then the man in front of me turned just slightly, and for half a second, I saw his face split, not in blood, not in pain. Just separated, 2 smiles layered slightly out of sync. One looked tired. The other looked grateful. It lasted less than a breath, then vanished like heat shimmer. But I knew what I saw. The prototype wasn't done with me. It had shifted tactics again. This time, it wasn't building rooms to trap me. It was testing me against the version that never left. I started seeing him more often, not in mirrors, not in dreams, in crowds, across the street, in places where I had just been. He wore my face, but slightly off. Smoother skin, calmer eyes. His clothes never wrinkled. He walked like the world never touched him. I tried confronting him once. Followed him through a crowded plaza. Tracked his every step as he moved like a ghost through bodies that parted without knowing why. I cornered him near an alley. When I turned him around, he smiled and said, "I'm the you that made the right choice." Then he disappeared. No smoke. No blur. Just gone like he had never been there, like he was made of unfinished thought. That's when I realized the prototype wasn't projecting him. I was. Every doubt I had. Every second I wished I could go back. Every day I thought, what if I had just stayed? Those thoughts didn't vanish. They grew roots. They shaped themselves. Took form. And now they were walking. He wasn't just a hallucination. He was a contender. The version of me that accepted the dream. The one who stayed in the house when the fire came. And now the house wanted to replace me with him. I began finding messages. Notes written in my handwriting, left in places I hadn't touched. One in my fridge, tucked into an old cereal box. "You've had your time." Another on my bathroom mirror, fogged into the condensation. "You don't belong out here." The worst was in my journal. A single sentence scrawled across 10 pages. "Let me live this one." It was more than taunting. It was a proposal. He wasn't trying to kill me. He was offering a swap. Give up the noise. Let go of the pain. Hand over the chaos. Let the version that stayed live this life right. Quiet. Clean. Beautiful. And some days I was tempted. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I wanted to rest. But then I found the garden. It was a new breach. Quiet. Hidden. Behind an apartment building I'd never seen before. Even though I walked that block every day, the gate was unlocked. The path was too perfect. Every flower bloomed in symmetry. Every tree curved just slightly toward the sunlight like dancers frozen mid-pose. At the center was a bench, and on it him. The version of me that stayed. He looked up, eyes kind, not evil, not smug, just tired in a different way. "You made it," he said. "I hoped you would." I said nothing. Because what do you say to a version of yourself who looks happy? He patted the bench beside him. I didn't move. So he spoke. "I'm not your enemy. I'm just a resolution. I'm everything you built the house to be before you let the fire change it." I looked around the garden. It was too much. Too quiet. Too finished. "This isn't healing," I said. "It's anesthesia." He nodded. "That's the point." He turned to me. "Do you remember the room with the snow globe?" I did. A forgotten space in the original house, filled with nothing but dust, a child's drawings, and a single snow globe that never melted. I'd passed it 100 times. Never opened it. Never understood it. He smiled wider. That was the first version of this. The seed. The perfect moment frozen forever. He stood up, walked toward me slowly. I didn't stay in the house because I was weak. I stayed because I was done. You're still addicted to the fight. But it's not noble anymore. You don't save anyone. You just interrupt. He stepped close, face inches from mine. "Let me finish what you started." And for a moment I saw it. A life with no fear, no fire, no watchers, no versions, just warmth, peace, completion. But then I blinked and saw the truth behind his eyes. The garden wasn't a place. It was a trap. Every flower a locked door. Every tree a memory filed too neatly. Every stone laid with the name of someone who gave up. And beneath his skin, layered under the smile, I saw the code, the symbols. The fire-proof architecture of the prototype. He wasn't the version that stayed. He was the version they wanted me to become. A construct, a final draft, a ghost made of longing, and he was trying to take my story. I stepped back, spoke clearly. "No," he frowned, "just slightly." "You'll come back," he said. And then the garden peeled. Petals fell upward. The sky cracked sideways, and the entire illusion dissolved. I was in an alley again, breathing heavy, hands shaking, and in my pocket a note, still in my handwriting, but now smeared, torn at the edges. A single line barely legible. "You passed." And beneath that, smaller, But next time, the offer won't be fake. I burned the note. Watched the smoke rise in the shape of a door I hadn't drawn. It hovered for a moment and vanished. The prototype had tested me again. It wasn't trying to win anymore. It was waiting for me to get tired. And when that day came, it wouldn't force me in. It would welcome me home. Cities hum, not just from traffic or voices or light, but from memory. You can feel it under your feet, the resonance of a million choices pressing against the pavement. But something changed. The hum went off key. The city I thought I knew began to warp, not all at once, but in tiny, nauseating twists. Streetlights started flickering in perfect rhythm, not chaos. Every pigeon on 7th Avenue turned its head at the same moment. People in line at the bank began swaying as if to music no one else heard. Then the subways stopped entirely. Not broken, not late, just silent, still, like the city itself had forgotten how to move. I knew what was happening. The prototype wasn't growing anymore. It was leaking. It started with the dreamers, the believers who walked into its rooms and never wanted to leave. But now, their dreams were blooming outward, infecting space they had never touched. The city had become a shared hallucination, held together by nostalgia and denial, and I could feel it trying to fold me in. Not through threats, through rhythm, repetition, familiarity. I began hearing my mother's voice in crosswalk signals. I saw my childhood dog at the corner of every block, always vanishing just before I reached him. The house had stopped chasing. It had started luring. One morning, I opened my front door and the hallway was gone. In its place, the neighborhood I grew up in. Not a recreation. The exact one. Even the cracks in the sidewalk were right. But I hadn't been there in over 20 years. I stepped back, closed the door, counted to 10, opened it again. Now it showed my college dorm. Same smell, same heat-drenched carpet, same door with my initials carved inside the desk drawer. It was personal now, targeted, not just memory. It had access to timeline. That's when I knew the prototype had begun sensing with more than just trauma. It was threading itself through possibility. Every life I could have lived, every path I hadn't taken, every choice that forked and branched, it now had coordinates. And it was mapping them onto reality like a second skin. I rushed outside. The street looked the same, but felt wrong. People I hadn't seen in years walked past, unchanged by time. Stores that had closed long ago were suddenly open again, and everyone moved just a little too perfectly, like choreography. I spotted her again. The girl, the first believer. She was standing at a newsstand that hadn't existed since 2007. Holding a paper with no headline, just a blank page. She saw me, smiled. "Don't fight it," she said. "You designed this. Let it work." I approached, slowly. "You're not real." She tilted her head. "Neither are you. Not the version walking around out here, anyway." I tried to grab the paper. My hand passed through it like steam. "I'm awake," I said, "to no one, to the sky, to the air." She laughed. A beautiful sound. The kind that doesn't belong in broken places. "You're awake inside," she whispered. "And that's the deepest dream of all." I turned away, ran. Every street curled into another memory. The city itself had become a labyrinth of who I used to be. My 5th grade classroom replaced the courthouse downtown. The gas station, where I kissed someone I never called again, was now City Hall. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a takeover. The prototype had figured it out, infiltration through identity. And then I saw the billboard, my face, smiling. The same smile the prototype version wore in the garden, and beside it the words THVRstion THSTALIDS Notivalb, a release announcement. The city wasn't being haunted, it was being launched. The dream had gone full scale. No more doors, no more portals, no more red lines. Reality had been merged. I stumbled into a bookstore, hoping for shelter, for grounding. The bell above the door jingled the exact same way it had the day I first met my best friend in 2003. I hadn't remembered that sound until just now. That's when I realized it wasn't pulling from memories. It was restoring them. Every forgotten detail. Every moment I hadn't thought of in years. It was rebuilding my past, frame by frame, choice by choice, until I no longer knew what was real and what was recovered. At the center of the store sat a child, alone, drawing on the floor with crayons. Red, of course. I approached. He looked up, and I knew that face. Younger, not the scared version, not the one from the closet. This one was pure, unbent, still capable of becoming anything. He pointed at the drawing, a house, but not the old one, not the burned one. This one was smooth, white, sunlit. He looked at me and said, "They said you were the first, but I'm the final." The page began to glow. And for a second, I believed him. This was how it ends, wasn't it? Not in fire, not in screams. In peace, a version of me who never got hurt, who never walked through ash, who never had to burn it down. The child stood, held the paper up. "Let me take it from here." I knelt down, eye to eye, and I whispered the one thing I knew the dream couldn't tolerate. The one sentence the real me never stopped believing: pain makes it real. And with that, I tore the page. The store vanished. The boy screamed, not in terror, but in rage. And the city glitched. Skylines doubled, then collapsed. Glass melted upward. The hum of the city cracked into static, and then I was back, on the sidewalk. The billboard was gone. The girl was gone, and the air was real again. But I knew better. It hadn't failed. It had tested scope, and now it knew how close it could get. I wasn't just haunted anymore. I was targeted. The version that stayed, he was still out there, still smiling, still waiting, still whispering to everyone who paused long enough to daydream. This can all be yours if you just stop remembering the pain. It didn't use my name anymore. That's how I knew it was evolving again. Not erasing me, replacing me. Names hold weight, and when the house first began, it needed mine. Needed to echo it in the walls, scrape it in whispers under the bed, write it backward in steam on mirrors just to stay tethered to this world. But now it had stopped calling. Not because it forgot me, but because it no longer needed to remember. Someone else had taken my place in the memory. And worse, they liked it there. I tried to find the last uncorrupted space in the city. A park that hadn't shifted. A diner that still had peeling menus instead of printed nostalgia. The world was still mostly intact, but reality was wearing thin, like breath fogging over glass. And sometimes, when I walked past windows, especially old ones with history baked into their dust, I didn't see myself. I saw him. The version that stayed. Perfect posture. Cleaner jawline. The calm in his eyes was never warm. It was hollow. Emptiness polished to look like peace, and he never blinked. I started asking people questions, not about me, about memory. Simple ones. Do you remember what song was playing yesterday? Do you remember the name of the street you grew up on? Most of them hesitated, just for a beat. Then answered with a soft smile, and the kind of tone people use when they're guessing, but want to sound certain. I realized that smile was the same across dozens of faces. That exact curve of the mouth, the same way their heads tilted. A performance rehearsed in unison. The dream wasn't just spreading, it was standardizing. There's a cost to forgetting that no one talks about. It's not just losing what hurt you, it's losing what made you real. Your scars, your wrong turns, the argument you regret, the time you failed and chose to try again. All of it grounded you. Without it, the self becomes template, and the house, the prototype. It didn't want to scare you. That was a rookie tactic. It wanted to homogenize you. It wanted to sand down every edge until you fit neatly in a place you never questioned. I started noticing how people began referring to me, not by my name, not even you, just him. Like I was an idea. I went to a library. One I used to sit in as a child during long summers when the A to C barely worked and books smelled like sleep. I found the local registry, searched my name. Gone, not missing. Gone. The records had been written around me. I searched addresses, phone numbers. Nothing. I'd been overwritten. That was when I understood what the prototype had really been after all along. Not my death, not my silence, my erasure. Because if no one remembers the original, the replacement becomes real. I wasn't in danger of being haunted. I was in danger of being unmade. I returned home to find the door open. My apartment perfectly intact, nothing out of place, except a suitcase by the bed, packed, labeled with my name. A single sticky note on top. He's ready now. You can go. I don't remember sitting down. Don't remember how long I stared at that bag. The weight of it was unbearable, not from mass but meaning. Because what if I left? What if I just gave in? Stopped fighting? Let the polished version of me step in and live the life without fire? What would really change? Wouldn't the world keep spinning? Wouldn't the people around me still smile? Maybe better. But then I remembered her face. The girl in the cafe. The way her eyes looked bright but unseeing. Her peace had cost everything she ever was. And I knew leaving wasn't an exit. It was a surrender. I opened the suitcase. Inside wasn't clothes, just pages, drawings, versions of me, moments I hadn't lived yet, but he had. Photos of weddings, births, quiet dinners, new homes, all perfect, all clean, all framed like catalog ads, not a single scar, not a single line out of place. I burned them, one by one. Watched the images curl and scream without sound. That's when the apartment began to bleed. Not red, not liquid, memory. Dripping down the walls in echoes. Conversations I'd forgotten. Laughter that hadn't happened yet. It was undoing itself, fighting back. Trying to trap me inside something I couldn't deny. The final version of me, the one that stayed, stepped into the room. He didn't speak. Just stood at the threshold, waiting. His face flickered between calm and desperate. Because he knew he wasn't complete without me. He couldn't exist fully until I stopped resisting. We stared at each other for a long time. And then I asked him the one question that shattered the room. What's my name? He blinked, stared, opened his mouth. Nothing. Because he didn't know. He'd lived the life. He'd walked the city. He'd worn my face. But he never earned the name. Because he never fought for it. And without that fight, he was just a sketch, a draft, an echo. He looked down at his hands. They were fading, cracking at the edges like old film. He stepped back, stumbling, and the room began to collapse, not in violence, but in quiet, one breath at a time, until I was alone, standing in my apartment, still forgotten, still erased, but me. And in that moment, I knew something else. The prototype wasn't done. It couldn't be. Because belief doesn't die in failure, it mutates. Every person who still chooses silence, every person who says, I'd rather forget, they're feeding it. I wasn't a shield anymore. I was a beacon, and they were coming for me next. But I knew my name, and I would never stop saying it. By now, I thought I'd seen every shape the prototype could take. Fire, silence, peace, memory. Even the perfect version of myself who nearly talked me into stepping away. But nothing prepared me for the echo. It didn't announce itself. It didn't slither through a dream or crawl out of a wall. It just walked into my apartment one morning while I was brushing my teeth, sat at the edge of my bed and waited. I saw him through the bathroom mirror, not as a flicker or a glitch, but fully there, legs crossed, head tilted, watching me the way someone watches a sunset they've already seen too many times. Familiar, bored, dangerous in his calm. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He just stared until I turned around. And when I did, he asked the most impossible question. Which one of us left first? The words hit me like static. Because he wasn't asking about the house. He wasn't talking about the fires or the prototype or even the dream. He was asking about the original split. The first time, I let a part of myself go without fighting to get it back. And I didn't have an answer, because I never noticed when it happened. That's the cruelty of grief. It doesn't rip out the pieces. It erodes them, smooths them down until one day you look in the mirror and realize something important isn't there anymore. not missing. Just forgotten. The echo stood, same height, same build, same voice. But something in his skin shimmered, like a costume worn too long under stage lights. He walked like me, but his footsteps didn't sound right. Each one felt like it was layered over another, like sound bouncing down a tunnel and never quite hitting the end. "I'm not the dream," he said. "I'm the result. I'm what's left when you remember just enough to hurt, but not enough to heal." That's when I understood. He wasn't the version that stayed. He was the version that never spoke. The one who swallowed the truth, who kept walking, who built a life out of repression and gave it a name. He wasn't peaceful. He was empty. I tried to speak, but the moment I opened my mouth, my voice broke. Not from fear, from doubt, because part of me wanted to know what it would feel like to stop fighting. To let this echo do the heavy lifting. Pretend the pain never had a name. Let it just hum in the background like an old refrigerator, always there, always forgotten. He held something in his hand, a photo of me, alone, but not broken. That was his offer, not bliss, not illusion, isolation. He could give me a version of life where I didn't need anyone, where nothing hurt because nothing mattered. The prototype had finally designed a perfect shield against reality numbness with a pulse. But I knew what came next. This wasn't just a confrontation. It was a test of succession. If I failed, the echo would become me in the eyes of the prototype, and I would vanish, not in death, but in redundancy. I took a step forward. The echo mirrored it. I raised my right hand. He raised his left. Not a reflection, a correction. He was showing me the reversal, the rewinding, the possibility of going back to the moment it all broke and choosing not to light the match. "I can make you forget the fire," he whispered, and I believed him, because he wasn't lying. That was the most dangerous thing about him. He meant it. I closed my eyes, breathed, reached into the pocket where I kept the drawing, the last one I hadn't burned. The very first sketch I ever made of the original house, from a dream I had when I was 12, back when it wasn't evil, back when it was just mystery, back before trauma turned it into a weapon. I held the drawing between us. "I made you," I said. "And I let you," he answered. I dropped the paper. The echo dove for it, and in that moment of movement, I reached through him. He wasn't solid. He was held together by memory. So I grabbed one, my own memory, and ripped it back. The moment I first heard the watchers in the wall. The night I first said I wasn't afraid. The first scar, the first drawing, the first fire. The truth of who I became. And the echo screamed, because it couldn't hold shape while I remembered fully. It shattered into sounds, not screams, phrases. All the things I'd ever tried to suppress. They filled the room like wind ripping through broken windows. And then, quiet. Real quiet. Not absence, peace. Because I hadn't silenced him. I had claimed myself. When I opened my eyes, the echo was gone, not erased. Returned. Absorbed back into the timeline of me. I stood alone, but not hollow, not broken, just aware. But something had shifted. The room didn't feel like mine anymore. The walls breathed in rhythm. My floorboards creaked in patterns I hadn't noticed before, and scrawled across the ceiling in ink too familiar to be anyone else's. "The prototype has your signature. It's building now." I left the apartment. The city felt thinner, like the sky had stretched further away, and everyone I passed had the same red dot behind their left ear. Subtle, hidden, but identical. They were being drafted, not into fear, not into dreams, into versions. The prototype wasn't growing anymore. It had gone to production. And every single believer, every quiet person smiling into nowhere, was a release candidate. But me, I was still the bug, still the problem they couldn't fix, still the one who knew his name. So I did the only thing left. I started drawing again. But not doors, not houses, maps of everything I remembered, every pain, every break, every truth. Because if the world was going to forget itself into perfection, then I would document the flaws. and I would make damn sure someone, somewhere, kept reading. You'd think drawing would get easier the more you did it. But that's the thing. When you're mapping truth, your hand doesn't glide, it drags. Each line costs something. Each curve forces you to remember things you swore you buried so deep they'd never rise again. But now, drawing was all I had. The prototype had claimed the city, the streets, the sky. It had rewritten faces, routines, even nostalgia. But it hadn't stolen my hand. Not yet. So I sat in the oldest library I could find, where the Fi barely worked, where the walls still smelled like mildew and ink, and I started to draw the world as it really was. Before the polish, before the erasure, before the dream took root. I didn't just sketch places. I etched memories, the kind of details the prototype never accounted for. My grandfather's mismatched shoelaces, the exact tilt of the sun on the day I got left behind at a gas station, the sound my knees made the first time I stood up after a panic attack. I knew this was more than resistance. It was rebellion, because while the believers lived in glossy loops of curated perfection, I was rebuilding the forgotten backbone of the real. And the real, it hurt, but it also mattered. The drawings began to grow strange. Not in style, content. I'd sketch a building I remembered, but the paper would warp, smudge itself. Details would vanish before I could ink them in, as if the paper was being rewritten from underneath. That's when I understood the prototype wasn't reacting to my maps. It was editing them in real time. It wasn't just attacking thought. It was laying claim to record. I switched to analog, ink pens, burned digital backups, started copying each map 3 times, hiding them in places I barely remembered afterward, just in case. I knew it was only a matter of time before the version of me who stayed, or the echo of that version, came back for the pages. They wouldn't come in fire or fury. They'd come with correction. That's how this worked now. Reality didn't break. It got revised. And then, one night, I found it. A building that shouldn't have been there. Not abandoned. Forgotten. Its name scraped off. Its windows bricked. But inside, I felt it. The thrum of unaltered truth. No echoes. No versions. Just a core. A hub. The point in the city that the prototype hadn't reached. Yet, I called it the anchor. Because something about it held fast. Even as the world bent around it, even as I watched people walk past without seeing it, the anchor remained. A vertical scar in the skyline. I moved in that same night, set up camp on the 15th floor. Old chairs, a rusted coffee pot, dust in every corner, but it was quiet. Not the silence of sedation, the silence of choice. I hung my maps across the walls, floor to ceiling. Pages fluttered like leaves, and that's when it happened. The paper began to sing. No melody, just a whispering hum of memory. My own voice, hundreds of it, overlapping. Laughing, crying, screaming. Living, the maps had become something else. Coordinates of self. Not a resistance anymore. A repository. I hadn't been mapping a way out. I'd been sketching a lifeboat. A way to store who I was before the dream took over everything. I backed up, stared at the walls, and realized this wasn't for me. It was for whoever came after. Because the prototype wouldn't stop. It had already begun embedding itself in language. I saw it on billboards, on cereal boxes, in disclaimers at the end of podcasts. Little phrases like happiness is just a version away. Choose comfort. Forget consequence. You deserve the life you don't remember choosing. They weren't ads. They were invitations. I had to accelerate. I started drawing faster. Pages filled with people I hadn't met yet but would. Places I hadn't been but needed to reach. Warnings encoded in detail. Every alley I passed that didn't look quite right. Every conversation that ended too cleanly. Then the paper began to rot. Not mold, not water time. The pages curled inward, aged overnight. My memories were expiring. The prototype had found me again. But this time, it didn't send watchers. It didn't send fire. It sent a child. Knock at the door. 2 sharp taps. I opened it. There she stood. Maybe 10, maybe 12. Same red ribbon I'd drawn 1,000 times without realizing why. Same freckles I had on my left cheek at that age. She was me. Before it all. Before the break. Before the house. She didn't speak. Just held out a box. Inside, ashes. Of my earliest drawings. Ones I hadn't made yet. "You're out of time," she said. "You can't map what's already been claimed." And then she reached for the wall. Touched a page. It blackened instantly. Like grief had licked it clean. I tried to grab her, but she was already stepping back, vanishing into the hallway like smoke, falling in reverse. And I understood. The prototype wasn't trying to destroy me anymore. It was trying to make me obsolete. By reaching back into the past and cutting off the very spark that made me draw in the first place. This wasn't a battle for survival. This was a war of authorship. I stared at the walls, my maps, my truth, and I made a decision. I couldn't protect all of it, but I could bury it. Hide it where memory can't reach. Where belief can't edit. Where not even the cleanest version of me would think to look. I began dismantling the anchor, brick by brick, each one sealed with a drawing, every floor a vault. I left behind one note, written in the hand I used before the fire: "If you find this, you haven't been claimed yet." Follow the cracks. The truth leaks through the fractures. When I walked out, I didn't look back. The city glimmered with the sheen of a world that forgot how to hurt. But beneath every smile, I knew the prototype was still watching, still revising, still offering versions. But somewhere, under layers of history and ash, there was a building that held the real. And when the world finally broke clean, someone would need to remember how to bleed. It started with glass, not the kind that shatters, the kind that stares back. I noticed it when brushing my teeth. My reflection blinked half a second out of sync, a hair's breadth of delay. Just long enough to feel wrong. Then came the department store window. I passed it without thinking, only to catch something in the corner of my eye. My reflection wasn't walking, it was watching. Standing still, waiting for me to turn around. When I did, nothing was there. But the chill that ran down my spine wasn't from fear. It was recognition. The prototype had found a new medium. It had given the versions a canvas with no walls. Mirrors used to show you who you were. Now they showed you who the world preferred you to be. And every time I glanced at one, the version in it looked more polished. Straighter teeth, neater hair, cleaner grief. But the worst part, he smiled more easily. That fake, frictionless calm I'd seen in the believers. The reflection wasn't just trying to mimic me anymore. It was inviting me in. The prototype had moved past rooms, cities, voices. Now it was eroding the boundary between version and self through appearance. One moment of curiosity. One indulgent glance. That's all it needed. I stopped using mirrors. Covered the bathroom one with a towel. Avoided windows. But they found other ways. Puddles on sidewalks. Car doors. Even smartphone screens. If it could reflect, it could reach. And soon, they weren't just showing cleaner versions. They were beginning to move independently. I caught my reflection shaking its head at me. Once, it walked away before I did. Another time, it mouthed something I couldn't hear, then smiled like it knew I never would. I recorded one of these moments, played the footage back. On the screen, I didn't appear at all. Just the room behind me. Empty. That's when I understood the prototype wasn't copying me anymore. It was displacing me. Every time I looked at a reflection, it was one step closer to taking my place. I tested it. Stood in front of a mirror for an hour straight, never blinking. My reflection stayed in sync until minute 57, when it blinked twice quick. Casual, but unmistakable. A glitch of confidence. I spoke aloud to it. Why now? It responded. Not out loud, with a gesture. It reached forward and touched the glass from the inside. And the surface rippled. Not like water, like fabric caught in a breeze. That's when I saw it, behind the reflection. A whole room. A waiting room. Filled with versions, all of them me. Sitting. Standing. Pacing. each one subtly different, each one wearing my life like a well-fitted mask. And they all turned, in perfect silence, in perfect unison, toward me. A single word crawled across the inside of the mirror. Etched by invisible fingers, were waiting. Waiting for what? For me to look too long. For me to forget which one I was. For the belief in my singular self to fade so they could step through. It didn't matter. The pressure was building. I smashed that mirror, not out of fear, out of defiance. And in the instant before the glass burst, I saw the face I feared most, not the polished version, not the broken one, not the child who never burned the house. I saw the me who never fought at all. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. He didn't ask to be remembered. He just stood there, timeless, waiting, like a tombstone with eyes. The mirror exploded. Shards flew everywhere, but none cut me. They just scattered around my feet like evidence. Each piece still holding a different version of my face. Some smiling, some crying, one with no mouth at all. I left them on the floor, walked barefoot over them. If the reflections wanted to escape, they'd have to do it through pain. In the days that followed, people began talking to their mirrors more. Not vanity, conversations. Whispered, smiling, a kind of secret pact. And if you watched long enough, you'd notice. They stopped blinking altogether. Not once. As if to say, I don't need this body anymore. I've stepped in. I carried a shard of the mirror with me. Taped the back. Wrote one sentence on it in permanent marker. If this starts smiling before I do, run. It saved me twice. Once in an elevator where my reflection tried to reach out through the brushed steel. And once in a hotel lobby where I saw 4 reflections in a 3-mirrored wall. I had become the last uncontrolled version, not just surviving the prototype, outpacing it, and that made me a problem. A virus in its system of dream, logic, and clean narrative. But I had one last weapon, memory. Imperfect, ragged, unfiltered memory. The kind that doesn't make good dreams. The kind that makes you wake up screaming. The kind you don't write down, because it's too heavy to reread. I began to speak them aloud, every night, like a prayer made of broken glass, and the prototype couldn't stop me. It could rewrite symbols, rewrite rooms, rewrite faces, but it couldn't erase what was spoken, so I found others. Survivors, outliers, people who noticed the delays in their own reflections, who flinched when the version in the car window didn't look away. We met underground. Basements, storage units, old tunnels no one remembered how to light, and we spoke, one memory each. One story that refused to be streamlined. We said them out loud, to each other, to the dark, to the mirrors we covered with sheets, and that's when the reflections began to panic. They flickered, glitched, one shattered on its own, and somewhere in the city, I knew a version of me fell to his knees, screaming. The prototype was losing sync. The truth wasn't just spreading, it was spilling. And the versions that were meant to replace us. They were starting to remember our memories, and they couldn't hold them, because perfection has no room for mess, no space for pain. And without pain, you're not human. You're a projection, a hope, an ad, a lie. And so, in the city of mirrors where reflections once smiled too wide, now they blink. Now they twitch. Now they cry. And somewhere out there, the version that stayed, he's looking into a mirror that won't smile back. He's asking himself the question that undoes the whole dream. What if I was never the real one? It had been years since I felt true heat. Not sunlight. Not the warmth of another's hand. I'm talking about that heat. The kind that wraps around your lungs and reminds you that some things want to consume you, not kill you. The fire had always been a symbol in my story, something tied to the first escape. But as I moved through the city that no longer recognized me, as the prototype rewrote street names and swapped memories like index cards, I felt something shift. The fire wasn't just metaphor anymore. It was back. And this time, it remembered me. It started with smoke. Not choking, not thick. just thin whispers of it trailing from cracks in the walls. Elevators that smelled like burnt paper. Manholes that hissed even on windless nights. I followed the trail through alleys that weren't there yesterday, stairwells that folded into themselves, until I found it, an old theater, sealed for decades, now pulsing with amber light through boards that looked too new. The marquee simply read Nano Pla Ying, Th Female Version. I stepped inside. No audience, no actors, just rows of red velvet seats, all turned to face a massive screen that flickered without sound. But then the screen blinked, not in pixels, lids human, and suddenly the screen wasn't a screen. It was a window, a doorway, a memory. Mine. The fire played back for me not how it happened, but how the prototype wanted me to remember it. I saw myself as a child, calm in the hallway, the flames licking the wallpaper like stage props. I saw myself smiling, unafraid, willing, a volunteer, the audience seats filled, row by row, with versions of me, some older, some younger, one that hadn't even been born yet. They clapped in perfect rhythm, not applause, a summoning. The prototype wasn't just rewriting history, it was trying to convince me I had wanted it. That the first fire had been choice, not chance. That I had built this horror because I craved the burn. And the worst part of me believed it. Because trauma rewrites memory when no one's looking. Because sometimes the escape becomes the prison. Because sometimes survival feels like guilt. Then the screen changed. Not the fire, not the room. Me, I was older, hollow-eyed, sitting in the same chair I sat in now, watching the same screen, smiling, as if I had finally agreed. And behind that version of me, in the theater seats, the other versions stood, walked to the stage, held hands, and began to burn, quietly, neatly, like paper surrendering to flame in polite protest. No screams, no resistance, just peace, manufactured, programmed. I stood and screamed, not words, not rage, just raw sound, and it cracked the screen. The blink froze, the fire paused. The version of me on screen turned toward the camera, toward me, and his smile broke. In that fracture, I saw everything. The prototype had never been trying to trap me. It had been trying to convince me, to accept, to adopt, to inherit the quiet, to stop holding the pain like a weapon, to finally say yes. But fire, it doesn't ask, it takes, unless you name it, unless you remember why it started. So I stepped onto the stage, faced the burning seats, and I named every version, out loud. The liar, the one who ran, the one who stayed, the one who forgave too easily, the one who never learned to speak, the one who turned silence into gospel, the one who thought being soft meant being broken. I named them all, and with each name, the flames recoiled. Because the prototype could rewrite faces, could rebuild cities, could overlay dreams, but it could not survive being known. The fire collapsed inward, ash folded like wings, and in its place, one final door, charred wood, no knob, just a handle made of bone. I gripped it, knew it was a mistake, knew it was the mistake I had to make, inside. Not another room, not another echo, my memory, raw, unfolded, the real fire, the one I ran from, the one I swore I'd never talk about. Not the metaphor, the truth, that I lit it, that I set the house ablaze, that I wanted the versions to die. Because each one was another way I let myself fracture. Because the house had become a graveyard of potential, and I couldn't breathe surrounded by ghosts of the me I never chose to be. That fire wasn't horror. It was grief in its most honest form. I fell to my knees, wept, not because I was broken, but because I was whole for the first time. The door behind me vanished, the theater gone. Just me, in the middle of the city, alone, but real. No reflections, no watchers, no whispers. Just the sound of my breath, and in the distance, one flicker of light in the sky that pulsed with a rhythm I finally recognized. It wasn't the prototype, it was a heartbeat. Mine. One part left, one version yet to face, the only one who never burned. It had waited, quietly, patiently, in the spaces I avoided, in the moments I distracted myself, in the softness between nightmares. The final version. The one I never wanted to name because I didn't think it deserved a name. Not the version that smiled too wide or blinked out of sync or whispered promises in the mirror. This one was worse because it never burned, never chose, never fought, never ran. It just stood still. A statue of what could have been if I had done nothing. No escape. No prototype. No memory. Just numb inertia. A life unlit, and now it wanted in. The city was still, eerily so. No wind, no buzz, no soft murmur of electricity running through buildings. It felt paused. Like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do. The sky had turned a strange shade of beige, not light, not dark, just blank, as if even the atmosphere had been scrubbed of conflict. I found myself drawn to the place where it all began. Not the prototype's lab. Not the mirrored city, the original house, or what remained of it. Somewhere between memory and myth, a piece of it still stood. Charred bones of walls, blackened beams curled into the ground like fingers clawing back into soil. It shouldn't exist, but it did, because every fire leaves a scar, and some places refuse to forget the burn, no matter how many versions try to paint over it. He was waiting there. The version that never burned, wearing the face I might have had if I'd chosen to ignore everything, if I'd kept going to work, paid my bills, smiled through the rot, let the numbness thicken until I mistook it for peace. He looked at me like someone seeing a faded photograph, with nostalgia, with pity. "You never had to fight," he said. I didn't respond. "You could have stayed. Let it wash over you. You didn't have to tear it all down." His voice wasn't mocking. That's what made it unbearable. It was kind, almost loving. He was the voice people use when talking someone off a ledge, but in reverse. He wanted to walk me back onto it. I didn't stay, I told him. I lit the match, he nodded. "And look where it brought you." "To the truth," I said. He smiled. "No teeth, just shadow. There's no prize for truth, just loneliness." That hit harder than any dream could have. Because there it was, the trade I made. Truth had cost me everything. Connection, comfort, certainty. And in its place, I had myself. But was that enough? He stepped closer. "I'm not your enemy," he said. "I'm what happens if you forgive yourself. If you let it be." I shook my head. Forgiveness without fire is just forgetting. We stood in the ashes together. Two roads that never crossed, staring down a moment that wasn't written in any of my maps. And then I saw it, in his hand. A matchbox, untouched, unburned. He hadn't just never burned, he never even tried. He held it out to me. Not as a trick, as a choice. One final rewrite. One last chance to undo the match. Take the pain and fold it neatly into a file marked past. Live again clean. No prototype. No fractures. Just blank piece. "Choose," he said, and I almost did. My hand reached for it, trembling. But then I looked down, the ground beneath him. No footprints, no shadow. He wasn't real. He wasn't a version. He was a temptation, the most dangerous of all. A life not lived, a grief not grieved, a burn that never scarred. And I knew, if I took that box, I wouldn't rewrite the past. I would erase it. I stepped back, reached into my coat, pulled out the last drawing. Not a door, not a house. Myself, crying, screaming, surviving. I held it up between us. "I choose this," I said. The version that never burned began to fade. Not in violence, in disappointment. As if I had turned down a gift I didn't understand. The sky behind him cracked, light pouring through in streaks too bright for memory. The air buzzed. Reality shuddered. And then, it collapsed. Not the city, the dream. Gone, instantly. Every version, every echo, every mirrored glance. Gone. And in their place, silence. But not numb. Not dead. Alive. Raw mine. I stood in the middle of an empty field where the city used to be, holding the drawing. No prototype. No watchers. No fire. Just breath. And memory. And the knowledge that no version of me, perfect or passive or pretend, would ever be strong enough to replace this one. The one who remembered. The one who fought. The one who burned and lived. I turned the paper over. A note, written in my own hand. Though I had no memory of writing it, You were never supposed to survive the fire. That's why it matters that you did. I smiled. No audience. No mirror, no echo, just me. And that was enough.